The first episode of the Visualization Practice of Compassion and Bodhicitta series talked about the correct explanation of love, bodhicitta of emptiness, oral pith instructions on the great perfection, and the fallacies of the crazy wisdom. For this episode, you can watch our uploaded video on YouTube. This is a basic understanding. You must watch it. The second episode talked about the visualization method of initiating the programming in entering into the Dharma realm to attain Buddhahood. You really need to watch this episode as there is a teaching in it about the programming of how to visualize and practice. But it lacks the Guru's guidance for undergoing profound training, so there are still a lot of things missing. But it is better than you know nothing at all. If you get to know a little, there will be a chance for you to enter into the Dharma realm, and stay in there. This is an opportunity. Therefore, what we publicly teach you is a deepening of what is taught in the Heart Sutra, and the Diamond Sutra, and it is a practical method of visualization practice. In fact, many people do not know about it. They do not even know some of its necessary elements, let alone apply them to Dharma practice. So, why is this episode so important? It not only teaches you some important factors of the Dharma realm, but also teaches you the visualization method for actual practices. But if you have not taken refuge yet and are not qualified disciples, the Guru cannot lead you in your Dharma practice. Then there will be a huge difference. Nevertheless, it lays some basic foundations for you. So, this episode is considerably important. Do not miss it. The third episode talked about the oral pith instructions in attaining the Dharmakaya Buddha, of the teachings on the key of life and death. This is about the scenes everyone will encounter after death that enables us to enter into the Dharma realm, and some phenomena that will appear and help us attain Buddhahood. These are some knacks. If we do not know about them, it is impossible to apply them. In our numerous past lifetimes, we have died many times and also been born many times. Every time we are born and die, these phenomena appear. However, since we do not understand them and do not know how to apply them, we miss the opportunity. Now that I have taught you about them, there will be at least an image in your database or memory system. When you encounter these phenomena in the future, your intrinsic awareness may suddenly arise such that you know how to apply them. At least there are some factors to increase your chances of being liberated from samsara and even attaining Buddhahood. So, needless to say, this episode is also very important. The fourth episode talked about the teachings on the key of life and death too. It turns out that many different levels and situations will appear after we die. And this belongs to the second level, which can also assist us in attaining Buddhahood. Again, this is not to be missed. Next is the fifth episode, which talked about the teachings on the key of life and death 3. It is about the third step we need to take after we die and miss the first two steps due to a lack of intrinsic awareness. When we come to the third step, taking rebirth is already inevitable. Nevertheless, you still need to know how to take rebirth. If you take rebirth wrongly in the realm of hells, hungry ghosts, or animals, that will be a big issue. What is the technique for taking rebirth? It has also been explained in this episode. If I do not take rebirth, can I become a Nirmanakaya Buddha? Of course, this opportunity exists, so this episode is also very important, that is not to be missed. Also, it has compared and incorporated the teachings of Heart Sutra and the Great Perfection, the latter of which is the highest practice method of our Red Sect of Tibetan Buddhism. Again, this is very important. The sixth episode started to talk about how we should practice Dharma in daily life. If we only practice Dharma when we are about to die, we will have nothing if we miss it. Then, can we grasp the time in our daily life for Dharma practice? Yes, it is feasible. As long as you can use the complementarity of the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and the Great Perfection to practice Dharma in your daily life, your chances will increase many times immediately. This is also a fundamental explanation. We have started to talk about the Diamond Sutra in this lecture. You have to watch it. The 7th episode talked about the oral pith instructions of the visualization practice on the nature of the 5 aggregates as emptiness in the Heart Sutra. When you enter into the Dharma realm, if you can stay there, you can attain Buddhahood. If you fail, you will fall out of there to continue reincarnation. Are there any oral pith instructions in the Heart Sutra that can teach us on this matter? Yes, there are. So, you must watch this episode. The 8th episode talked about the oral pith instructions of the visualization practice on emptiness, neither existence nor voidness of the Great Perfection, in daily life. This is a deeper level of teaching. When we want to practice the Holy Dharma, how do we incorporate it into our daily life? There are many things in daily life that cannot be emptied. To enter into the Dharma realm, you must have the quality of emptiness, that is, neither existence nor voidness, then only can you stay. How to strike a balance between the two? You have to watch the 8th episode. Of course, this episode only talked about some fundamental things, but how to act in complementary with the actual practice has not been said yet. The 9th episode talked about how to use emptiness to visualize compassion in order to detach from emotional sufferings. In daily life, a lot of sufferings will definitely appear. How do we act in concert with emptiness to visualize and practice compassion to balance our painful emotions? You definitely need to watch this episode. That is, you have to make a choice whether you want to continue to be immersed in pain and continue reincarnation. If you're immersed in pain, it means that you are sticking to and fond of this pain. Or you may not like it but keep sticking to this pain. There are some factors that can remove the pain, but you never consider them and would rather stick to the pain. This means that you can never get rid of this magnetic field. As a result, you will continue reincarnation in places with lots of sufferings. After all, do you want to adopt or abandon? Do you want to adopt the continuation of suffering? Or do you want to focus on the visualization practice of emptiness and stop thinking about the pain? Then you may have a chance to be out of trouble. How do you decide what to adopt or abandon? What are necessary to be paid attention to? So, you have to watch the 9th episode. The 10th episode talked about what is the difference between the Dharma practice of abiding in notions and that of non-abiding in notions in the Diamond Sutra. What is abiding in notions and non-abiding in notions? That is, you are attached to something and trapped in it, so you have to continue reincarnation and cannot enter into the Dharma realm, but only stay in the 3 realms. If you are attached to something, you must be in the 3 realms. Because only when being in the 3 realms will you be attached to something. In the Dharma realm, you will not cling on to certain things, that is, you will not abide in notions. If you insist on being attached to something and abiding in notions, you are doomed to reincarnation. If you are not attached to something, you have the opportunity to enter into the Dharma realm. That is, you have the opportunity to attain Buddhahood. In fact, are there any Dharma practice methods of abiding in notions, that is, to cling on to something? And are there some teaching methods of non-abiding in notions that teach you not to cling on to something right from the beginning? Yes, there are. The Diamond Sutra teaches you not to be attached to something. Otherwise, you are doomed to continue reincarnation. If you are not attached to something, you are destined to have the opportunity to stay in the Dharma realm, to attain Buddhahood and be free from the pain of reincarnation. Actually, what are the differences between these Dharma practices? Again, you have to watch this episode. Then, the 11th episode, that is the current episode. It has been said in the Diamond Sutra, just one thought of pure belief in any phrase or verse in the Diamond Sutra brings immeasurable virtuous merits. Where is the justification? I do not believe that just believing it will have immeasurable virtuous merits. Is it real? Where is the justification? This is what to be talked about in this episode. Before I start, let me make a quick recap. This topic is called compassion and bodhicitta. What are these? Regarding compassion, it is easy to understand, right? It refers to the kind of compassion you generally have towards other sentient beings. If we do not have it, we cannot go to the Buddha's Pure Lands. That is, the hope for selecting a better position in the process of reincarnation will not be possible. What is compassion? It can be divided into mercy and pity. Mercy is to give others happiness, and pity is to remove others' sufferings. As for this pity, we are usually born with a bit of it, but it is better if we are trained. And mercy is to give others happiness. We need to go through some sharing, some experience, and education to understand it. In this way, we will see how much of its quality we can improve. How many points do we have for the quality of compassion? When we elevate our compassion, it will trigger our intrinsic awareness more. Do you know what intrinsic awareness is? Simply speaking, it is the ability to understand. For example, you are doing a challenging mathematic question that you cannot understand after thinking for a long time. But suddenly, you figure it out in a split second. This is the enlightened nature. You can realize something thoroughly. However, in the ocean of sufferings of life and death, we are not talking about mathematics, but how to arouse intrinsic awareness in a split second so that we no longer need to reincarnate in this ocean of sufferings. This is very important. This kind of enlightened nature is called intrinsic awareness, which we also call bodhicitta. This bodhicitta is a kind of intrinsic awareness. Without it, one cannot attain Buddhahood. However, because it is too abstract, people do not understand it. So, it is divided into relative bodhicitta and absolute bodhicitta. What is relative bodhicitta? That is what the worldly realm says. We must have bodhicitta, we must practice diligently and be kind to others. These are called relative bodhicitta, which is what the secular world calls it. However, you think that you have always been good to others, helping others, and somewhat practicing Dharma. You think this is equivalent to developing your enlightened nature and intrinsic awareness to realize the truth. And so you will know how to enter into the Dharma realm without falling out of it. Far from it. It turns out that you really need to have a kind of true and genuine bodhicitta called the absolute bodhicitta. What is the absolute bodhicitta? It is the bodhicitta of the highest level, most thorough, and most splendid truth. What is it? It is the perfect enlightenment. That is to restore 100% of the realizing and understanding ability without any deviation. This is called the absolute bodhicitta. If I want to recover 100% of this kind of realizing and understanding ability or enlightened nature, without any deviation, not just retaining 99.5% and losing a little bit of it, how should I practice? You must act in complementary with precepts, meditative concentration, and wisdom, and then make adjustments to balance it back to the middle way, without deviation and bias to one side. Then you can take advantage of this force to enter a state of emptiness, neither existence nor voidness. Only then can you arouse this kind of intrinsic awareness. What is neither existence nor voidness? It is not existent, but neither is it non-existent. So what is it? We have explained it before. Neither existence means all scenes we see in reality are a kind of transient phenomenon that will dissolve sooner or later. They are manifestations of the projection of Dharma nature. It can also be said to be a kind of karmic entanglement between us and other sentient beings. It is a kind of scene created by everyone together. In fact, it is a kind of illusion that is transient but makes you continue to reincarnate and fall deeply into sorrow. If you cling on to the existence of something, for example, you might insist, I really see my husband standing in front of me now. If you are always attached to something, you do not know that when you or your husband dies decades later, the two of you will eventually be separated. Then you will change to another scene, not knowing where to take rebirth. At that time, maybe what you have is not a husband but a wife. Later, again you do not know where you will be reborn. You might take rebirth in the realm of animals or hungry ghosts, not even have a husband or wife. So, you will realize that all these are transient in nature. It is an ocean of sufferings. To put it simply, it is a boundless ocean of sufferings, which has no boundaries and is endless. In this life, you are very attached to your husband. You watch him closely and do not allow him to go to other women. But in the next life, you may not even have a husband and do not know what you will be reborn as. All of these are an ocean of sufferings, a kind of phenomenon and illusion that entangles us and makes our minds experience endless sufferings. Therefore, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni urged you all to practice the holy Dharma as soon as possible to restore your intrinsic awareness or realizing and understanding ability of true 100% perfect enlightenment. This is to enable yourselves to be liberated from this ocean of sufferings without the need to continue with the reincarnations. This is to avoid the kind of attachments in which you thought that you would have to be reborn as a pig once you thought so, and could no longer to be reborn as a dog instead. As long as we can enter into the Dharma realm, and do not fall out of it, we can attain Buddhahood. We can then restore our perfect enlightenment. Thus, we restore our great ability, enjoy the infinite bliss of Dharmata, and be free forever. This is what the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni taught us. If we want to restore the realizing and understanding of this 100% bodhicitta, please learn about emptiness as your basic foundation. What is neither existence? For all these illusory phenomena, you should not grasp onto them anymore. They are not real, and they are constantly changing. They are changing from day to night, just like your mind. What is nor voidness? In fact, you have intrinsic awareness. It is not empty. There is enlightened nature of realizing and understanding within you. You must find a way to restore this intrinsic awareness back to 100%. You should not empty it. Otherwise, you will become an insensate stone and be trapped in a realm where there is nothing at all, without intrinsic awareness, yet continue staying in the three realms. You will still have to continue with the reincarnations thereafter. This is called the insensate emptiness. Simply put, you can call it an erroneous emptiness. So, the Diamond Sutra teaches us how to restore bodhicitta, that is, the perfect enlightenment, and the absolute bodhicitta. Okay, how to recover it? Now let us take a look. Nowadays, when some people want to practice the holy Dharma, how do they usually practice? They usually feel that the practice of compassion is the easiest thing to master, such as helping others by removing their sufferings or giving them happiness. They also made wishes to help all sentient beings. Therefore, everything they do will benefit both themselves and others. It is a win-win situation. It will not be a one-way situation, such as only helping others but leaving tremendous pain for themselves. For instance, if you donate all your family wealth, you will starve to death, unable to practice the holy Dharma. Meanwhile, others will divide up your inheritance and might use it for gambling or drugs taking. You will never know. You just want to help others. What will happen after you help him out? Is it thorough? Only then did you realize that this is not a thorough help. In other words, if this relative bodhicitta is not incorporated with wisdom, it turns out that it will often fall into another level of pain. Therefore, whether we want to practice compassion or relative bodhicitta, it must be a win-win situation, to benefit both oneself and others. Furthermore, we must observe the precepts called bodhisattva precepts. Only in this way can we succeed in our Dharma practice. But you may say, I'm very smart. After listening to your explanation, I can understand fully. Even if you can score 100 points, you still need 2 to 3 great asimhaya kalpas to achieve this goal. Only then can you proceed to practice the fifth step, the absolute bodhicitta of the intrinsic awareness. That is to say, in the programmings of your Dharma practice, if you only practice the first to fourth steps but not the intrinsic awareness, without any behavioral formula and programming to help you practice the intrinsic awareness. In your guru's teachings, these things have never been taught. You have to know that the Buddhist holy Dharma that is generally taught nowadays only teaches you compassion. Or if there are more and deeper teachings, then relative bodhicitta will be taught as well. If you ask them to teach you the most splendid, absolute bodhicitta, you may faint upon hearing the proper nouns they say. You do not need to continue your learning, and you will not be successful in your Dharma practice because you do not understand what they say. Therefore, many people's Dharma practice programming includes only the first to fourth steps without the fifth step. What will happen then? Here comes a big problem. Because they only know how to chant Namo Buddha Amitabha, but nothing else. That is, the first to second levels may be relatively okay for them to understand, but not the deeper levels. In this way, it will take 2 to 3 great asimhaya kalpas for them to advance to absolute bodhicitta. Even so, they still need to continue practicing on the absolute bodhicitta. That is, they still have to continue reincarnations within this cycle of karmic existence. How do you know if you will be lucky enough to continue to be reborn as a human in every lifetime and continue to practice on this compassion? Of course not. You will never know where you would be reborn. So, we are now so lucky to be reborn as a human. We are so lucky to have someone to have so clearly explained to us, all the way from the first point up to the fifth point, as to what is absolute bodhicitta. Therefore, you must remember to include the first to the fifth steps in your Dharma practice programming. It must have the fifth step. You ask, how can the fifth step be included? This question will be explained in today's lecture. This fifth one is very important. In fact, it has been explained in the previous lectures, but it will be explained more clearly today. What did we talk about before? It turns out that when we continue reincarnation in the ocean of sufferings of life and death, this kind of process is called the transitional period. It turns out that every birth and every death is a transitional period. We give it a name, called bardo, or the intermediate stage. It means something that exists, or something that shades you. To put it simply, there is a body. Now your body is sheltering you and helping you to resist something. When some magnetic fields are attracting you, if you do not have a physical body to resist them, you will easily be sucked in. Now that you have a physical body and are a human being, you know how to walk, run, and protect yourselves. This is the existence of a kind of protective shade, just as an object that protects you materialistically. The entire bardo is called the transitional period. After you die, there is a transitional period. Before you take your rebirth, there is a transitional period, too. When we die, this transitional period is divided into three: the bardo of dying, the bardo of dharmata, and the bardo of becoming. These are all very important stages. We have already explained them from the first to the fifth episodes of the Visualization Practice of Compassion and Bodhicitta series. But I'm telling you, they are too important for you. Remember to watch them a few more times, make notes, and read them several times a day. When you're really dying, you will surely have some impressions. If you only just listen to me once and do not revise them, you will soon forget them. Hence, when you die and encounter these scenes again, there is no way to master them at all. They will pass by within a flash, and you will miss the opportunities again. Then you will have to take rebirth and die again in your next life before another chance appears. But in your next life, will there be anyone who will explain the Buddhist teachings to you again? Or will there be any YouTube videos for you to select and then watch then leisurely? I am afraid not so. Try and see if there is a YouTube channel in the realm of hells or realm of animals for you to watch. No, there will be none. Then, you will not know how many millions of rebirths you have to go through again before you have another chance. But I think there will be none because these opportunities are indeed too difficult to encounter. So, you must re-watch the first to fifth episodes, familiarize yourselves with and memorize them, prescribing the right medicine for the right disease in order to help yourselves. There are some people saying, well, you do not know about life, how do you know about death? They criticize why we talk about the bardo of dying, and the bardo of dharmata, and what the transitional periods will be after death. This is because they do not understand. They do not have the knowledge, so they attack others and tell others not to learn. However, for such important things, you certainly must learn them. Do not lower yourselves to the same level as them. You must prescribe the right medicine for the right disease, for all matters. The stuff we are talking about now, starting from the 6th to the 11th sessions and continuing, what are they all about? They are all about the bardo of this life. This is the transitional period, in our daily life, from when we are still alive until the moment just before we die. Actually, what should we do before we can help ourselves? We are now teaching you how to have a Dharma practice programming that will include the first to the fifth steps, not leave out the fifth, or only include the first two. It is to divide the 24 hours in a day into 3 periods for visualization practice. The first one is the moment we just wake up from sleep, or when we are emerging from a meditative state, or during a session of meditative concentration. This part is about the time when we are alive. In fact, it also includes the time when we die, that is, the time when we enter into the Dharma realm. But since we are now referring to when we are alive, there is no mention of when we die here. So, you will find it is only talking about waking up from sleep, emerging from a meditative state, or during a session of meditative concentration. But in fact, this practice should be done one step further, that is, at the time when you die. It is also one of the moments when you will enter into the Dharma realm. You have to initiate the programming in entering into the Dharma realm, too. This has been explained from the first to the fifth episodes. Now, when we talk about daily life or in dreams, when are we referring to? When we are awake, and even when we dream. These are the times when we are trained in the 3 realms. We have to do some training to help us restore 100% of the realizing and understanding ability. This has been explained starting from the 6th episode. If this is your first time listening to my explanations, I hope you will watch the 1st to 10th episode so that you will be clearer. We are still explaining this part. As for the moments when we are ready to fall asleep, or enter a meditative state, these are the times when we are ready to enter into the Dharma realm. We have to input a formal programming that prepares us to enter into the Dharma realm. After it is being initiated, it will officially run. But you will have to input it first. Okay, if we can do it, if this training is done well, we can have a high chance or a high success rate to restore our intrinsic nature, that is the Buddha nature, also known as the Dharma nature. We can restore our concealed, realizing and understanding, ability or Buddha nature, to that of 100% perfect enlightenment. That is, our bodhicitta will be restored. What are the benefits of restoring it? We can be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence, or even to attain Buddhahood. These are the benefits. If we want to talk about the situations when entering into the Dharma realm, such as the moment of waking up from sleep, we will use the Heart Sutra to explain it. If we want to talk about how to simulate a state in our daily life to enter into the Dharma realm, while we are still obviously living in the three realms, we will use the Diamond Sutra to learn how to practice before we can simulate that state. We have already talked about part of the Diamond Sutra. Let us have a review. Where did the Diamond Sutra come from? At that time, an elder named Subhuti asked the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, how do we resolve to attain unsurpassed perfect enlightenment Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi? How to interpret this? That is, how do we arouse the absolute bodhicitta? That is to say, how do we restore our realizing and understanding ability, or the ability of one's own intrinsic awareness to that of 100% without deviation, that is, the perfect enlightenment? If we want to reach this level in our Dharma practice, how should our minds be abiding by? How should our thoughts be subdued? In other words, if I want my Dharma practice to reach this level, what should I have to bear in my mind? Where should my mind abide in? How should it be trained? Does it mean that so long I keep on thinking about attaining Buddhahood, then this wishful thinking will automatically happen? With so many defilements in our daily life, how do I subdue them in order to stay focused on the practice of absolute bodhicitta, and can succeed in attaining perfect enlightenment? That is the absolute bodhicitta. In other words, how to attain Buddhahood. At that time, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni gave two oral pith instructions. One is, should not abide anywhere, and the other is, do not abide in notions. That means we should not be attached to any kind of notions, appearances, or forms, or thinkings, or views. Notions can be interpreted as forms and appearances, as well as thoughts and thinking, or views. Should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions mean that you have to realize and know that all the deluded thoughts, all such projections, are temporary displays of the Dharma nature. Dharma nature is a kind of your own intrinsic nature, a kind of your own essential nature. We simply call it as the Dharma nature. Originally, it was very clear and pure and good. However, after a long period of reincarnations, the pure Dharma nature could no longer be manifested and was hidden and covered. So, we are no longer clear-headed. We often make a screen and project a lot of things, making ourselves messy about things, and so we took rebirths indiscriminately. So, we have to wake up. To wake up means to remind yourselves. All those scenes you see that draw you and make you miserable, or attract your attention and make you think very happy, are merely projections or manifestations of your own Dharma nature. You have to know that all these are just deluded thoughts. You have to realize and know that they are a kind of deluded thoughts. Do not stop and stay there. They are not eternal and unchanging. They change from time to time. If you realize and understand this, you have the opportunity to arouse the 100% of perfect enlightenment. Actually, this is an oral pith instruction. The oral pith instruction of neither existence nor voidness. What is neither existence? That is, all these deluded thoughts are not real and existent but just a kind of projection. What is null voidness? Your realizing and understanding ability, but your ability of intrinsic awareness needs to be restored to 100%. This kind of ability is null voidness. It is not empty at all. Your realizing and knowing ability does exist. While it is not empty, it is not real either, because realizing and knowing is not a materialistic substance. Where did we stop in the last session? In the last session, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni said, Elder Subhuti, you must remember that all bodhisattvas should abide their minds in this way as I taught. All sentient beings must understand this sentence and these oral pith instructions I said just now. He said, all bodhisattvas should use the method I teach now to abide their minds in the state of don't abide in notions. What is in your mind? It has to be in the state of don't abide in notions. In this way, you will get infinite merits, and will even be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence, or to attain Buddhahood. It will be explained in details as to why there are infinite merits in this session. In fact, it has already been explained before. What else did we explain in the last session? We talked about this sentence, all forms are nothing but illusions. When you see various forms and consider them to be non-forms, you are seeing the Tathagatas. The meaning of this is that all forms, appearances, or notions you see are just illusions and deluded thoughts. They are all projections, and they will change within an instant. Do not be attached to them. Do not cling on to them. When we see the manifestations of any forms, appearances, or notions, if we can realize and know that they're not eternal and unchanging, it means we can realize and know their true existence, as it truly is. This means that you can restore 100% of your ability of perfect enlightenment. If you can restore this kind of realizing and knowing ability, it is equivalent to your being able to see the Tathagata. As explained in the last session, if you can see the perfect enlightenment, it is equivalent to you seeing Buddha. Seeing Buddha means seeing Tathagata. Tathagata means Buddha. For a detailed explanation, you can watch the previous episode. We will continue to talk about the Diamond Sutra in this session. This is where we left off. The elder Subhuti said to the Buddha, world-honored one, i.e. Lord Buddha, will there be sentient beings who can develop a true belief in these words, sentences and chapters when they are expounded to them? It means, a world-honored one. The Dharma practices of non-abiding in notions, as said by you, means the methods whereby one should practice Dharma without being attached to certain forms, appearances, or notions. That is, one should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions. All forms are nothing but illusions. When you see various forms and consider them to be non-forms, you are seeing the Tathagatas. Oh, how abstruse they are! Will some sentient beings give rise to true beliefs after listening to these kinds of teachings? He asked. These teachings are so abstruse and hard to understand. When one sees these forms, one has to take them as non-forms. Will there be anyone who believes in what you say? The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni almost scolded him and said, don't say such a thing. This sentence is quite heavy. You know, Subhuti was already an elder, but he was scolded by the Buddha for asking a question in front of thousands of people. The Lord Buddha said, you should never say so. You must not say that. Don't say such a thing, means that you cannot say it this way. This is a heavy sentence. For an elder, speaking to him like this in public was almost the same as scolding him. In the fifth 500-year period after the Mahaparinirvana of the Tathagata, there will be people who observe the precepts and perform meritorious acts. These people will develop faith in these sentences and chapters, which they will consider as embodying the truth. You should know that they have planted virtuous roots not only in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 Buddha lands, but in immeasurable thousands of Buddha lands. First of all, let me explain what the virtuous roots are. The virtuous roots mean that your nature of mind has no greed, hatred, and ignorance. Everything that is done or thought by this nature of mind, which has no greed, hatred, or ignorance, will bring virtuous retributions. Therefore, this nature of mind without greed, hatred, and ignorance is the root of a virtuous mind nature. It is also the root for us to get virtuous retributions, so it is called the virtuous root. That is, the virtuous mind nature is the kind of root that will make you get virtuous retributions, so it is called the virtuous root. The Lord Buddha said, after the Mahaparinirvana of the Tathagata, meaning after the Buddha, the Lord Buddha was referring to himself, entered the Mahaparinirvana in the 5th 500-year period. I will explain the meaning of this later, since some people asked if it means within 500 years after the Buddha's Mahaparinirvana. As some people misinterpreted it, I will explain it to you specifically. Some people do well in observing the precepts and performing meritorious acts. They can truly have faith in the sentences, chapters, and oral pith instructions we are explaining now. They understand that these are authentic and incorporate them into their Dharma practices. I can tell you that these people have not only planted virtuous mind nature in 1 Buddha land, 2 Buddha lands, 3 Buddha lands, 4 Buddha lands, or 5 Buddha lands. Those people with such virtuous roots have already planted these virtuous roots within the periods of immeasurable thousands of kalpas of Buddhas. In other words, you have planted these virtuous roots, and you have planted so many of them within the periods of thousands of kalpas of Buddhas. Yet you are still in the learning phase and have not yet attained Buddhahood. What are these telling you? It is true. There are still people who believe in those words and sentences in the 5th 500-year period after the Mahaparinirvana of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. But have they succeeded in their Dharma practices? Why are they unsuccessful despite having all those kinds of virtuous roots? They have already planted all these virtuous roots within the periods of hundred thousands of Buddhas, but why are they still unsuccessful in their Dharma practices? They had the virtuous roots and merits planted within the periods of hundred thousands of Buddhas, so they can become humans and can listen to such profound teachings as the Diamond Sutra. It is the same with you all. You are sitting here and listening to the Diamond Sutra. I can tell you that you must have planted a lot of virtuous merits in your previous lifetimes. Otherwise, how can you be seated here? This includes those who can hear to this lecture once it is uploaded onto YouTube. Why can they hear it but not being able to succeed in their Dharma practices? I will explain to you later as to why you cannot succeed in your Dharma practices, and will still have to continue sitting and listening here. Despite the fact that you're having planted all those virtuous roots within the periods of immeasurable hundred thousands of Buddhas. But still, you have the chance to hear it. It is better than having no chance to hear it at all. If you were in hell, you would not have a chance in the slightest, would you? I have already talked about some of the reasons before. What are the reasons? Because they all only practice the first of the 4th steps. What is missing? The 5th step is missing. Therefore, despite having planted virtuous roots in immeasurable thousands of kalpas, I am sorry to say that you still have to keep listening and to continue practicing the holy Dharma. You have not yet been able to be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence, neither have you been able to attain Buddhahood. You can imagine that if you only practice the 1st to the 4th steps, that is, only practice compassion and relative bodhicitta, is it possible for you to attain Buddhahood? It is still possible, but you would not know when. It is an unforeseeable date. What is in the 5th 500-year period? I will explain it now. In the Mahavipulya Mahasamata Sutra, it was stated that there are 500-year periods. The fifth 500 years are what we call the fifth 500-year period. From what time do we start counting this fifth 500-year period? It is counted from the time after the Lord Buddha had entered into Mahaparinirvana. Let us calculate. The first 500-year period, that is, the first 500 years after the Lord Buddha's Mahaparinirvana, was excellent. It was characterized by the solidity of liberation. In other words, unless you did not practice the holy Dharma, as long as you were willing to practice, you would definitely be able to be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence. Moreover, the number of people who were able to be liberated was very large. You might ask, why was this so? Why is it that in the first 500 years after the Buddha's Mahaparinirvana, those people would succeed if they wanted to practice the holy Dharma? But those of us will not succeed even if we want to practice. Didn't all of us listen to the same things the Buddha said? Of course not. You will know after listening to my explanations. The second 500-year period was characterized by the certainty of meditation, meaning that there were many serious Dharma practitioners. In the second 500 years, many people practiced diligently and seriously in remote mountains, but they still failed in being liberated from the cycle of karmic existence. They could only achieve certainty of meditation. Doesn't the phrase, certainty of meditation, indicate a very high meditational power? Won't a high meditational power enable one to become liberated? Why are the two phrases, certainty of liberation, and certainty of meditation, not the same? They are different, of course. Nowadays, when many people teach meditation or dhyana, they might teach you how to observe your mindfulness. They only know in teaching you how to sit for meditation, but they do not know how to explain the Diamond Sutra, Heart Sutra, and other important Buddhist sutras. Neither will they talk about how one should not abide anywhere. They will say nothing of these but only teach you how to meditate. Maybe they will talk about a little bit of this. But will they explain the Diamond Sutra in details as what I do now? Even the Lord Buddha would have to sit down and explain to you in details, let alone myself. However, they only teach you how to sit for meditation, claiming that you will succeed in your Dharma practice as long as you can sit calmly and firmly to achieve high meditational power. It is wrong to say so. Because having meditational power does not mean that you can automatically be liberated. It just means that you can, depending on the level of your meditational power, enter the low-level heavenly realms, or the high-level heavenly realms. Among the three realms, I can tell you that the heavenly realm is where all Dharma practitioners want to enter into. If they cannot attain Buddhahood, they will choose to enter into the heavenly realm instead. There are both low-level heavenly realms and high-level heavenly realms. The high-level heavenly realms are called the heavens of the form realm. The material substances there are very sparse, not as dense as ours here. I tell you that without meditational power, you cannot reach the heavenly realm, especially the high-level heavenly realms. As for the low-level heavenly realms, as long as you plant some merits, practice on compassion, perform virtuous deeds, have a kind heart, and you have planted virtuous roots within the periods of the immeasurable thousands of Buddhas, then you can, in fact, already have the good chance to reach the heavenly realm, but only the lower tiers. But for the high-level heavenly realms, it is not enough to plant some merits, perform virtuous deeds, or do things that benefit both oneself and others. It requires one to have meditational power. And that kind of meditational power must be very solid, which means that it has to reach a high percentage of 80% to 100% before one can really enter into the high-level heavenly realms. There are 18 levels in the heavens of the form realm. The 5 highest levels are called the 5 heavens of non-returning. Once you enter there, you can be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence. These are the 5 heavenly realms where you do not need to suffer in the cycle of karmic existence, but you require a very high level of meditational power to enter into. Many Dharma practitioners have misunderstood that as long as they practice well in sitting meditation and acquire a high meditational power, they can attain Buddhahood. Yet, they were unable to attain Buddhahood even after sitting for a long time. Actually, what are the factors involved in attaining Buddhahood? You have to understand what emptiness, neither existence nor voidness, is all about. You must have to master what is emptiness, neither existence nor voidness. How to master? Please be well versed in the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra. Being well versed alone is still not enough, as this is just an understanding. You still have to apply them in your daily life and to incorporate them into your Dharma practice. You must be able to apply them to the Dharma practice, and be able to succeed in your Dharma practice, before you can really attain Buddhahood. Why was it possible to succeed in the first 500-year period? In the first 500 years of certainty of liberation, some people could attain Buddhahood by practicing the Holy Dharma according to the Diamond Sutra and Heart Sutra. I tell you that, at that time, there was no written record. They all used spoken languages to deliver the Holy Dharma, which we call as the mouth-to-ear transmission. Take for example, I am now teaching an oral pith instruction to you, and then continuously talk about it in more details, just like what I now keep talking and repeating it to you. If that person can really understand all of it, then he would be more likely to succeed in his Dharma practice. So, in the first 500-year period, the Guru passed it on to the disciples, and the disciples passed it on to their grand disciples, who then passed it on to the great-grand disciples, and so on. In the first 500-year period, everyone told each other how to practice and then learned it by heart. Not only did they recite and memorize it every day, but they also put them into real practice. Since they had the opportunity to hear the practical experiences and oral pith instructions of other practitioners, they would be more likely to succeed in their Dharma practices. They locked themselves in solitary retreats in remote mountains and were confident about what they were practicing. They had practice methods to follow through and made no mistakes in their Dharma practices. They did not just sit there like a piece of wood, but instead they knew very well as to how to master their own Dharma practices. You might ask, let's say I am only well versed in the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra. I have understood everything about these sutras and known how to incorporate them into my Dharma practice. And you have also taught me how to initiate the programming in entering into the Dharma realm. Suppose I am now your disciple, and you taught me how to undergo the actual practice of the programming in entering into the Dharma realm, and even taught me how to remain over there. I am already well trained in all these aspects. In this way, will I still be able to enter into the Dharma realm and to attain Buddhahood without meditational power? The answer is that you only need a short span of meditational power. You do not need to maintain it for 1 day, 2 days, or 7 days. You just need to maintain your meditational power for a short period of time. There is no need for your meditational power to be as high as 100%. You may only need meditational power of 20% to 30% to complement with your mastery of the actual practice on emptiness in order to attain Buddhahood. But, if you say that you do not have such actual practices, and have just listened to my teachings on the YouTube, then I am sorry to say, I have never taught you how to undertake actual practices in those videos, which means that you have missed the most important part on actual practice. That part of the mouth-to-ear transmission, which will lead and teach you how to actually practice. You would not have this part of the actual practice. Without it, your Dharma practice will not be successful. However, your hearings of the YouTube videos are still better than nothing. You can accumulate the merits slowly. This is how the virtuous roots of attaining Buddhahood are to be accumulated over immeasurable thousands of kalpas. You can slowly accumulate them. If you say that you are unwilling to take refuge and learn these, then you can watch our YouTube videos and accumulate slowly. But the benefits are great already, and your path of Dharma practice has been shortened by many kalpas. Okay, this shows one thing: if you want to be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence or attain Buddhahood, you do not necessarily need to have 100 points of meditational power. You only need 20 to 30 points of meditational power to complement with your Dharma practice for more successful results. What is the key to your success in attaining Buddhahood? It depends on whether you know how to apply such teachings in the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and the Great Perfection. If you do not know about these, and no one has ever taught you to initiate the programming of entering into the Dharma realm, and how to apply this programming, you will never know how to do so. Even when interpreting the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra, you can only interpret some of the proper nouns literally without the real understanding of their hidden connotations. So, this is the reason why only so few people could ever succeed in their Dharma practices down the road. In the first 500-year period, there were still people who could successfully explain. When it came to the second 500-year period, why could no one do it anymore? I will explain to you in a while. It turned out that what the Lord Buddha had said was being tampered with later, and a lot of things were missing. Therefore, although many people practiced seriously, but those who taught them would only taught them how to sit for meditation. So, they just kept on sitting for meditation. In this way, even if you achieve 100 points in sitting meditation, you can at most only enter into the high-level heavenly realms. But can you reach one of the 5 highest levels? I cannot guarantee that. This is because to enter into the 5 highest levels, you would need more than just meditational power of 100%. Which would only mean that you are eligible to enter into and might have a high ladder to climb up there. So, in the second 500-year period, there were actually very few people who could attain Buddhahood. The third 500-year period was called the certainty of much hearing. That is, many people had explained about the Buddhist holy Dharma, and many people had listened to them seriously. Though there were people who have explained on the holy Dharma, yet those who learned them seriously and then put them into real practice were actually very few in the third 500-year period. In the second 500-year period, there were still quite a few people who had learned and practiced the holy Dharma seriously, but then by the third 500-year period only a very few people did so. The fourth 500-year period was called the certainty of towers and temples, meaning that many people just did some window dressing, such as by building a temple or donating some money for charity. Or that everyone started building temples together, so that there were many temples and many Buddha statues built to be worshipped by other people. Then all the people felt at ease, thinking that they had been blessed by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They felt delighted, thinking that they had succeeded in learning Buddhism. So, no one could really succeed in their Dharma practices simply because they were just being symbolic in terms of all their actions. The fifth 500-year period was characterized by the certainty of quarrels and disputes. That is, there were many quarrels and disputes among the followers of Buddhism, who fought against each other. The Hinayana followers said that Mahayana was no good. The Mahayana followers said that Vajrayana was no good. The Vajrayana followers said that both Hinayana and Mahayana were not okay. They scolded at each other and fought against each other. In fact, all 3 schools of Buddhism were all derived from the same origin of teachings from the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, but they were at different stages of learning and development. Hence, they should not scold at each other, just like primary school students scolding at university students, nor that university students scolding at middle school students. They should and could be compatible and interoperable with each other for their Dharma practices to become successful. But, when it came to the fifth 500-year period, everyone had begun to fight against each other. Therefore, the first and the second 500-year periods were called the perfect age of the true Dharma. At that time, there was no deviation in the holy Dharma. The third and the fourth 500-year periods were called the Dharma semblance age. What is the Dharma semblance age? There were already deviations in the Dharma teachings, which just resembled the true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma. People claim to be teaching the genuine Dharma. But then those teachings only resembled the Buddhist holy Dharma, they were not the real and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma. For example, they only taught you to recite Namo Buddha Amitabha, and you would not need to learn anything else. These are called semblance Dharma. The true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma talks about emptiness, neither existence nor voidness, and also teaches you how to attain Buddhahood and to become liberated from the cycle of karmic existence. These are the true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma. Teaching you to recite Namo Buddha Amitabha is only an expedient means. What is an expedient means? You are now so painful in the ocean of sufferings, unable to reach the other shore. Okay, if you recite Namo Buddha Amitabha, I will throw you a rope and try to pull you ashore. You can stand on the shore temporarily without having to suffer in the ocean of sufferings. But, if you do not continue with your Dharma practice down the road, what you are practicing now is just a temporary expedient means. If you do not continue your Dharma practice down the road, you will then soon fall back into the ocean, and you need to find someone else to rescue you again. This is because you have not actually gone ashore. You are just temporarily standing on the floating sand. That is to say, all the Buddha's Pure Lands will also perish finally, after all, simply because they are within the three realms. Everything is impermanent, and so are the Buddha's Pure Lands. If you do not practice the holy Dharma, there is really no way out. Just teaching people to recite Namo Buddha Amitabha, or by telling them that they will only need to read one sutra but not any other Buddhist scriptures, will make those sentient beings do not know the fifth step of how to restore the intrinsic awareness. This is, indeed, very miserable. This kind of phenomenon appeared in this Dharma semblance age. Many people said something very similar to the Dharma, but in fact these are not the real and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma. They were just some expedient means. Thus this period was called the Dharma semblance age. The fifth 500-year period was called the Dharma ending age. There was already not much real and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma left. Well, how do we divide these periods nowadays? I will tell you now. The current period we are in is the 21st century. In fact, how long has it been since the Lord Buddha's Mahaparinirvana? It has been more than 2,500 years, and so it belongs to the Dharma ending age. The Dharma ending age will last for as long as 10,000 years. So, there are still a few thousands of years of the Dharma ending age, and there is still a very small amount of Buddhist holy Dharma left for you to learn. But they are just superficial teachings, and it is already practically almost impossible for you to learn the very essence of the holy Dharma. Is this really true? Well, everything is impermanent, and so is this a law of what you are now saying. As according to the current worldwide unified Buddha's birthday, the Lord Buddha was born more than 2,500 years ago. If calculated based on the Chinese historical records, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was born in the 24th year of the King Zhou, which was more than 3,000 years away from the present. I think that this version of the Lord Buddha's birthday as related to King Zhou is somewhat disputable. But many people said it is true, while many others had been puzzled by it. The world-recognized version says that it is more than 2,500 years of history. However, if using the second way of calculation, it is more than 3,000 years. And so there is a difference of 500 years in between the two versions. If there is only a few years difference, then it can still have some room for discussion. But with a difference of 500 years, can we continue to argue? However, this is not what we are going to discuss today. What we are going to discuss about has actually been mentioned in the wisdom in directing one's Dharma practice back in the 8th issue of our Lake of Lotus. There it tells us one thing: consequential retributions will change in accordance with the change of causes and conditions and karmic forces. They are not eternal and immutable. They are impermanent. The Lord Buddha already talked about the fifth 500-year period. How is this fifth 500-year period being calculated? It turns out that this itself could be changed. In fact, the main reason why we need to put into practice of the Holy Dharma is to bring about changes. We don't want to continue on with our reincarnations. Instead, we want to change this impermanence into eternity. I can enter eternity when I enter into the Dharma realm. That's why we must have to practice the Holy Dharma. That is, this fifth 500-year period itself can also be changed. The perfect age of the true Dharma refers to the period when there were people who taught the Dharma teachings, people who practiced the Dharma practices, and people who had attained the various fruits of realization. The Dharma semblance age refers to the period when there were still many people who taught the Dharma teachings, but only a few of them who practiced the Dharma practices. And even a smaller amount of them had attained the various fruits of realization. The Dharma ending age refers to the period when there were still people who taught the Dharma teachings, but none of them would practice the Dharma practices. And so nobody would have attained the various fruits of realization. In this way, the longer the Buddhist Holy Dharma has been propagated, the more serious the distortions and/or losses of all the real and genuine Dharma teachings that have been passed on to us. Whether they are the oral pith instructions, or the essences of the actual practices. In fact, basically, all the essences have already disappeared. So, what is it that so many people have often been talking about nowadays? That is, superstitions, supernatural powers, blessings, empowerments and all that. Even Vajrayana is in the same boat. In the near future, all those gurus will not know how to teach the Holy Dharma, but they only know how to do rituals and to give empowerments. All these are simply called fraudulent deceptions. As according to the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's formal explanation, empowerments cannot be given casually. That particular person must be up to a certain level and be qualified enough to receive it, before he can truly be certified to receive it. To certify an unqualified person is equivalent to a fraudulent deception. That is, while in deceiving that person, one is also acting in a way to deceive oneself as well. Most of the gurus of nowadays are doing exactly all these sorts of things. Why? To perform an empowerment rituals, they simply need to hold the vase and put it on the top of your head. They do not need to understand any Buddhist Holy Dharma, they simply need to wear beautiful costumes to show others. Then, all of you will simply make offerings to them, and they would then become those great Dharma kings. What an easy way for the propagation of the Dharma. I want to do it too, just a joke. If you want them to explain so many details about the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra, to make PowerPoint slides, to edit videos, and then put them onto the YouTube, they will certainly not do such kinds of troublesome things. Why do they have to put in so much effort? Why not just do something which can help to make money very easily? So, are we now actually in the Dharma ending age, or in the Dharma semblance age? You can actually decide and choose. This is, indeed, a watershed. I think there are certain things that you will need to distinguish very clearly. Anyone who messes up with the Buddhist Holy Dharma is, indeed, trying to fast-track the clock of the Buddhist Holy Dharma to the Dharma ending age. How can we be able to remedy this situation? It can be done only if there are those people who know the real and genuine teachings for the Dharma practices, as well as there are those people who are willing to accept the rigorous trainings of the Dharma teachings. Because the real and genuine teachings for the Dharma practices are very strict. One must have to observe all the precepts and samayas, and one will be scolded very severely by the genuine gurus for only making some very small mistakes. And that one will be asked to do repentances and public confessions of sins. There are many other requirements as well. Real gurus are very demanding and fierce, isn't it? Therefore, there must be those people who are willing to accept such rigorous trainings of the Dharma teachings before this can really happen. If you say, I wouldn't accept those conditions, you just teach me and let me decide whether I want to accept and practice those teachings or not. In this way, you will not succeed in your Dharma practice, and will only waste the genuine guru's efforts. You might as well give it up and stop learning at all. Therefore, if you really want to practice the Holy Dharma to become liberated from the cycle of karmic existence, you must have to find someone who is willing to be so strict with you. She must be able to successfully teach you something and be able to implement them strictly. Thus both the teaching aspect on those Dharma teachings, as well as the implementation aspect of those strict rules and regulations must have to be carried out simultaneously. If there are some people who are willing to accept so many teachings, it is indeed a rarity. For instance, they have to watch all of our videos on the YouTube. There are so many videos that they have to finish watching, even without sleeping. There might be some people who are willing to watch all the videos, are willing to take refuge, are willing to accept such strict teachings and disciplines, as well as willing to be reprimanded for any minor mistakes being done. Such kind of people is rapidly decreasing day by day. Therefore, as a result, it is very likely that there is no one who can really succeed in her Dharma practices. This is actually very easy to explain. If this phenomenon can be changed, this is equivalent to being able to change the fifth 500-year period. Why? This is because there were mentions in both the Grove of Pearls Inner Dharma Garden, Faoyuan Zhulan, and the Tripitaka Dharma lists from the Canon, Sanjiang Fashu, page 111 as follows. The Buddha's pewter staff Skt. Kakara had been placed in the dragon's cave for 40 years, thereby prolonging the perfect age of the true Dharma by 400 years. The perfect age of the true Dharma was originally only 1,000 years, and so by now it had become 1,400 years. The Buddha's pewter staff Skt. Kakara had actually been in the dragon's cave for 40 years already. Hence, this kind of change and phenomenon would certainly have happened. Both scriptures further mentioned that this prolonged the Dharma semblance age by 1,500 years, for a total of 2,500 years. In other words, it had now become 2,500 years, while the Dharma ending age had been prolonged by 20,000 years, for a total of 30,000 years. Hence, there will be a further extension of 20,000 years to the Dharma ending age, and would thus make it to become a total of 30,000 years. Okay, let us now take a look. The first General Conference of the World Fellowship of Buddhists was held in Colombo, Sri Lanka. One of the conference's resolutions stated that we have now decided that there will be no more disputes. The Lord Buddha was born in 623 BCE, had attained enlightenment in 588 BCE, and had entered into Mahaparinirvana in 543 BCE. Which year is it by now? It is now 2018. How is the number of years to be calculated since the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's Mahaparinirvana? By adding the year 543 BCE and the current year 2018 CE, that is 2018 plus 543, we can conclude that the year we are now in is 2561 years away from the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's Mahaparinirvana. So, what do you say that we are now in, either the Dharma semblance age, or the Dharma ending age? If it had not been for the prolongation by the Buddha's pewter staff SKT Kakara in the Dragon's Cave, we would unfortunately have already been in the Dharma ending age, and the fifth 500-year period would have already passed. Then, we would have nothing left and nothing to learn, and we would not succeed in our Dharma practices. But now, because of this prolongation, some people still say that we belong to the fifth 500-year period. But some other people would say, no, we are still in the Dharma semblance age. So, are we in the Dharma semblance age? It is calculated like the following way, and not to be calculated from the Dharma ending age. 1400 is the perfect age of the true Dharma, and 2500 is the Dharma semblance age. There are 2500 years in the Dharma semblance age, and 1400 years in the perfect age of the true Dharma. So, it is 1400 plus 2500, which is 3900 years. That is to say, it is still being considered as the Dharma semblance age within the 3,900 years after the Buddha's Mahaparinirvana. You see, we are now only 2,561 years away, that is, we are still within the range of 3,900 years. In such a case, are we now in the fifth 500-year period of the Dharma ending age, or are we now still in the Dharma semblance age? So, there are still some people who are arguing about this. I think that they should stop arguing anymore. I would say that now is still the Dharma semblance age. I would not say that now is the first 500 years of the Dharma ending age, and it is not yet the fifth 500-year period. This is what I think. Because the fifth 500-year period means the fifth 500 years. But since it has been prolonged, this is no longer being calculated like this. It is no longer being calculated in this way. For this calculation, the meaning of the fifth 500-year period should be interpreted as the first 500 years of the Dharma ending age. In fact, we have not yet entered into the Dharma ending age. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's calculation was an estimate based on the time and space, causes and conditions, as well as collective karmas at that time. Yet, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had said that everything is impermanent, and when everything changes, that estimate will also be changed. Therefore, the interpretation of the fifth 500-year period is equivalent to the first 500 years of the Dharma ending age, as mentioned by the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni at that time. They were being called as the fifth 500-year period. Now we are not yet in the Dharma ending age, but instead we are now still in the Dharma semblance age. So, we do not belong to the period of the fifth 500-year period, and this fifth 500-year period will only be the time after us. We are, indeed, very fortunate that we are now still in the Dharma semblance age. Now let us further illustrate this. In this Dharma semblance age, there will still be some people who can successfully teach and explain the real and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma. But then, there are only a very few people who will really practice the holy Dharma, and even fewer people who can finally attain the various fruits of realization. The reason is that many people have messed up the Buddhist holy Dharma through the improper transmittance of more superstitions, supernatural powers, blessings, and empowerments. In so doing, they have reinforced and increased the greed, hatred and ignorance in the minds of many sentient beings, who would simply hope that by continuously receiving massive amounts of empowerments, they could easily attain Buddhahood without having to practice the holy Dharma at all. How nice it would be, don't you think so? In this way, all the real and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma have been distorted and perverted as a result. Okay, let us see now. If the fifth 500-year period has been changed and postponed, and so we are now in the Dharma semblance age, which has been extended to become 2,500 years. Hence there should be a sign for its prolongation to 2,500 years. Has such a sign appeared? If there is no such sign, then it cannot be called the Dharma semblance age. Also, if there is no exponent who can succeed in explaining the true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma, then it can only be called as the Dharma ending age. Are there any signs that prove that it is the Dharma semblance age, now? Yes, indeed, there is such a sign. This sign is whether there is someone who can explain and apply the scriptures and teachings of the most profound levels. If there is such a person, it proves that now is the Dharma semblance age. On the other hand, if there is no such a person, then it proves that it belongs to the Dharma ending age. Hence, what is meant by a profound level? Which are considered as the most profound Buddhist scriptures. One of them is the Heart Sutra, of course. What does the Heart Sutra talk about? Can anyone explain clearly that the Heart Sutra talks about the state of the Dharma realm? If you have never heard of anyone in explaining the Heart Sutra in this way, it means that no one could explain it at that time, and it was still considered as the Dharma ending age. Yet, when such a person appears who can make such kind of explanations, then it becomes the Dharma semblance age. Because the Heart Sutra is in fact a sutra, which talks about how one can enter into the Dharma realm, and stay in the Dharma realm. As well as what kind of a state of affairs does the Dharma realm look like. If the one who taught about the Dharma teachings of the Heart Sutra could not explain these important messages to others, or just simply providing a literal explanation of the sutra such as, there is nothing. There is no old age, no death, nothing at all. Likewise, there is no wisdom and no attainment. There is nothing at all. And then all the others simply took it in this way and thought that this particular person had already completely finished with the explanations of the whole sutra. In this way, no one would really know what that particular person was talking about. She also spoke of the five aggregates are all empty. What does it really mean? Is it possible to apply the five aggregates are all empty in order to stay in the Dharma realm? She cannot even explain clearly as to what the Dharma realm really is, and so, how can she teach you to stay in the Dharma realm? In a nutshell, she just simply cannot explain the essence of the Heart Sutra, and she can only explain it to you in a literal manner. But it turns out that the Heart Sutra is talking all about the operation of the Dharma realm, the state of affairs of the Dharma realm, and the features of the Dharma realm. So, how can one act in concert with these features in order to stay over there? Hence, if you cannot explain that the Heart Sutra is talking about the state of affairs of the Dharma realm, in fact, you have not really explained the Heart Sutra at all. You have not even explained 10% of it. In short, you simply cannot apply it. Because if you do not know that the Heart Sutra is talking all about the Dharma realm, and how to act in concert with its features, then how can you ever possibly apply it? In other words, if someone can explain all these things to you, then it shows that you will be able to apply them. Of course, she has to teach you how to apply it, and you also have to learn and understand the methods that she has taught you for its application. Now that only the state of affairs have been explained to you, but then the applications have not yet been taught. So, it is really necessary to teach you how to apply it as well. In the future, we will continue to explain how to apply it when we continue to talk about this series on compassion and bodhicitta, but then we will not explain the parts on the real practices. The real practices cannot be made known to the public simply because this belongs to the mouth-to-ear transmission. Hence, for the parts on the real practices, I am sorry to say, it cannot be taught to you at all. Okay, as for the Diamond Sutra, it is actually talking about how we can undergo simulation trainings in our daily life, in order to simulate the state of the affairs of the Dharma realm, so that we would be able to enter into the Dharma realm when we die in the future, or when we sit for meditation and inadvertently enter into the Dharma realm. We can stay over there and to attain Buddhahood. That was how the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni kept on sitting under the Bodhi tree until he finally attained enlightenment Buddhahood. The Diamond Sutra teaches you how to practice in your daily life by simulating the state of affairs of the Dharma realm, so that we can easily enter into the Dharma realm. Does anyone explain these to you before? If no one explains all these, but if they only explain it in a literal sense, you will definitely do not know how to apply the Diamond Sutra. On the other hand, if someone can really explain all these things very clearly, this is already a sign. This sign shows that now is still in the Dharma semblance age. You will still have the opportunity to practice the holy Dharma and to attain the various fruits of realization. In addition, if someone can teach you the great perfection, the highest teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, in matching with more advanced oral pith instructions on the real practices from the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra, you will most likely be able to succeed in your Dharma practices. All these are known as the signs. So, indeed, now still belongs to the Dharma semblance age. About the fact that there were people who taught the Dharma teachings, you might say, in all three periods, there were people who taught the Dharma teachings. So what are the differences among them? In the first 500 years of the perfect age of the true Dharma, there were some gurus who had used the mouth-to-ear transmission, that is, with the gurus speaking directly into the ears of the disciples by teaching them those oral pith instructions on the essences of the real practices, and then passed them on from one generation to the next generation, and so on. Also, what kind of language was being used in all of their explanations? These were taught, not in classical Chinese nor Sanskrit nor classical Tibetan, but in a vernacular language that one could easily understand instead, so that one can really understand them once you have listened to those teachings. It is like what I am speaking to you now in plain Cantonese, which you can easily understand. I am not speaking some very difficult classical Chinese, which you could not understand at all of what I am talking about. So, the first 500 years were different. Everyone could attain the various fruits of realization, and they had solid realizations. It was unlike those people in the second 500 years, who only knew how to sit for meditation, only able to attain the certainty of meditation, but could not attain the various fruits of realization. Thus, they were unable to enter into the Dharma realm, and had failed in their Dharma practices. It would not be like that. What about the current Dharma semblance age? In the Dharma semblance age, if someone not only teaches you to sit for meditation, but also really teaches you some true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma, it is not just to teach you about sitting meditation, as meditation in itself is not a Buddhist holy Dharma, but in teaching you how to master the importance of emptiness as the true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma. Therefore, meditational power is just an auxiliary force to assist you to do better in your Dharma practice. The true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma is not teaching you about the power of meditation, but instead it should teach you about the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, emptiness. And everything comes from the mind. Also, the teaching you of reciting Namo Buddha Amitabha is not the true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma, but it is just an expedient means. So, you must remember that you have to distinguish clearly what is the true and genuine Buddhist holy Dharma. If someone explains it very thoroughly and clearly, this is a sign that it is still in the Dharma semblance age. According to the prophecy of His Holiness Kyabje Chadral Sangidorya Rinpoche, which mentioned that all the teachings of both Vajra masters Yeshe Thay and Pema Ladran will be propagated and passed on for a long time, for over 1,000 years, and will be able to save a lot of people. I did not quite understand it at that time. In fact, His Holiness Kyabje Dujom Jigdral Yeshe Dorya Rinpoche had mentioned it even more clearly. He said, Vajra Master Lao Yuiche, one of our root gurus, had an outstanding disciple, who is capable of explaining the Buddhist holy Dharma thoroughly, and will be able to help a lot of people and bring great transformations to the status quo of Buddhist practices. Indeed, both the prophetic statements of His Holiness Kyabje Dujom Jigdral Yeshe Dorya Rinpoche and of His Holiness Kyabje Chadral Sangidorya Rinpoche were very consistent with each other. In fact, as for the two prophecies of both Rinpoches, I think that part of their statements can be fulfilled by relying on the internet. I did not understand these prophecies at that time, as these were told to us many years ago, much more than 10 years ago. At that time, the internet already existed, but it was still rather rudimentary, slow and far behind what is now. So, I think it is possible for the two Rinpoches' prophecies to be fulfilled in that way. Yet, will all of them be fulfilled? No, not yet, because what I am now teaching you is only on the explanatory level, but it is impossible for me to upload onto the YouTube those teachings that are on the level of guiding you in the real practices. This cannot be done, this is not allowed. I have explained it before, once you have many oral pith instructions to be made known to the karmic creditors, you will not be able to continue on with your Dharma practices. So, these could not be taught to the public, nor could they be put on the internet. We must have to lead and guide those disciples who have taken refuge from us before we can really teach them to put those teachings into real practices. This can only be done through the mouth-to-ear transmission. This mouth-to-ear transmission has thus been constrained for this reason. That is, there are only dozens of people who can really follow us to practice. Since I am very strict, a lot of them have been weeded out by me and have left already. As such, very few people can really follow us to practice. Hence, only a few of them who can practice the Dharma practices, and even a smaller amount of them might be able to attain the various fruits of realization. Some of my disciples are lazy and they seldom practice. Some disciples often violate the precepts and get reprimanded and to be corrected by me. Just in correcting their mistakes and their precept violations has already taken up a lot of my scarce resource time. This is also one of the journeys of Dharma practice, but there is still a long way to go before stepping into the formal practice of intrinsic awareness. However, if we subtract 2,561 years from 3,900 years, we still have at least 1,339 years that belong to the Dharma semblance age. In other words, we still have 1,339 years to have the opportunity to succeed in our Dharma practices. Once we reach the Dharma ending age, no one can be able to succeed in Dharma practices, and no one can be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence, or to attain Buddhahood. There would still be people who would explain the Buddhist Dharma to you, and you would still be able to watch them on the YouTube. But I believe that if we calculate in using the prophecy of His Holiness Kyabje Chadral Sangidorya Rinpoche, we should be able to pass on our teachings for at least 1,000 years or more. For 1,000+ years, that is, 1,339 years, I think it should not be too difficult. If using the YouTube or the internet for dissemination, 1,000+ years should be possible. If we have to meet the following conditions, that if we are to really lead other people to practice, if we are to fulfill the prophecy of His Holiness Kyabje Chadral Sangye Dorje Rinpoche, and if we are to achieve the mouth-to-ear transmission. All these would also mean that one more thing had already been predicted. That is to say, some of our disciples and grand disciples will be able to inherit and uphold those teachings of real practices that we have taught. That they will succeed in their Dharma practices and attain the various fruits of realization. At least some of them will succeed, right? And then they will be able to inherit and uphold our teachings, and then they will continue to teach other people. Only then can the propagation of those teachings be able to be prolonged, in order to fulfill His Holiness Kyabje Chadral Sangye Dorje Rinpoche's prophecy. So, I have made some calculations based upon this conjecture, and I feel that some of those who follow us in their Dharma practices should be able to succeed. You can have a look at the case of Soengor Wang. We have a video on the YouTube entitled, "Are There Women in the Western Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss?" And there is another video about a rare real-life case, in which Ms. Titik gave testimony. These are the two videos about one of my disciples, Wang Soengor, who had followed us for 7 years. She did not understand emptiness, and she did not understand anything. She had heard of the Heart Sutra, but did not understand it. Likewise, she did not understand the Diamond Sutra, despite having heard of it before. She only knew how to recite Namo Buddha Amitabha. Still, she followed us and so listened to us every day. And I also taught her the Buddhist Holy Dharma for many years. With just such kind of virtuous merits, of course, she was very diligent in her own Dharma practice and had very little greed, hatred, and ignorance in her. She could already be easily led by us to the Buddha's Pure Land. And then, she could continue her Dharma practice in the Buddha's Pure Land. What was she going to practice? She was going to practice on emptiness. She could not understand it when she was alive, owing to her old age, the limitations of her brain, and the limitations of her knowledge and education. Now that she has already reached that special situation in the Buddha's Pure Land, there were no more limitations to her, and so she could continue on with her learning process. But still, she needed to continue on with her Dharma practice and the whole learning process. As for whether you all can successfully go to Buddha's Pure Lands now, I have no idea. Are you as good as Wang Soengor? I have no idea either. I do not know what level you have achieved for your Dharma practice, and I cannot guarantee that you will succeed. However, now that you can listen to me explaining the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, it is already a kind of virtuous merit. You can already accumulate immeasurable virtuous merits. So, you must cherish it. This prophecy tells us one important thing. That it was true that in the perfect age of the true Dharma, there were people who had taught the Dharma teachings, people who had practiced the Dharma practices, and people who had attained the various fruits of realization. Thus, in the first 500 years of the perfect age of the true Dharma, there were people who had really taught the Dharma teachings via the mouth-to-ear transmission. So, there were people who had attained the various fruits of realization, which was the certainty of realization, but this was no longer possible in the 500 years afterwards. Thus, in the Dharma ending age, there were still people who would teach the Dharma teachings, but none of them would really practice the Dharma practices. And so no one would attain the various fruits of realization. So, you have to remember that there are still 1,339 years to go before it would really be entering into the Dharma ending age. Though you only have a lifespan of several decades, you must have to cherish this very lifetime, for you do not know if you will be able to take rebirths again within these 1,339 years. and whether you will be able to listen to these important Buddhist scriptures again or not. This really cannot be known. But one thing is very important. You have to remember that just the explanations of the doctrines are not enough. You will need to apply them and to get guidance in your real practices. After listening to my explanation, you still will not know how to master and practice yet. When compared with the total incomprehension of the contents before, it is very much different by now. At least, you know what the contents are talking about by now. It makes a huge difference. In Buddhism, there are 4 stages: belief, understanding, action, realization. You have belief, you believe in it now. But do you have the real understanding? The term understanding has 2 tiers of meanings, the first of which is just explanation. Is there anyone who can interpret it thoroughly, and then provide an easy-to-understand and correct explanation to you? If you say that no one can successfully explain it, needless to say, you will not be able to understand it thoroughly. If they only explain the terminologies and definitions, and at best you can only memorize those terminologies very well. Or else, you can only understand all those terminologies or proper nouns at best. But then, how can you possibly understand the deep meanings behind them? No, you just cannot. If no one can successfully explain them to you, you will just not be able to understand it. If you really have to rely upon your own power of understanding, you will probably need 3 great Asamkhya kalpas in order to make it. In this way, you really have to accumulate your power of understanding, slowly. That is, you must remember this. Some people may think, I just need to watch your YouTube videos. I don't need to take refuge from you and let you discipline me strictly. I will definitely not accept it. In this way, I can only do the explanation part of it. So, to what level can they only be able to reach? The levels of belief and understanding. Can they achieve the levels of action and realization? Sorry, no, they just cannot. How to practice the holy Dharma. How to execute. How to take actual actions. How to apply the teachings in the scriptures in order to design a behavioral programming for one's Dharma practice. Is there anyone who can guide you in your Dharma practice, and to verify on your realization? No, there is not. Therefore, the 2 stages of action and realization cannot be achieved. If you have not even gone through the execution stage and are still in the understanding stage, do you think you can attain Buddhahood? After you die and enter into the Dharma realm, do you think you can stay there without falling out? I have already told you before, there is no way. The odds are weighted heavily against you, but at least you have some impressions, and it is better than nothing. But is there a chance of 1 in several quadrillions that you can stay there? Maybe there is. You may have already planted a lot of virtuous merits in the countless past lifetimes, and finally, there is a chance of 1 in several quadrillions for you to stay there. This is possible, and I cannot guarantee it. Perhaps you may be able to make it. But the odds are too slim. It is like buying a Mark 6 lottery ticket. Have you ever won it? The odds are many times slimmer than winning the lottery. In other words, this action is crucial. Therefore, you should pay attention to the power of execution. The power of execution is vital. Even if you can understand those things thoroughly, they are useless if you do not execute them. So, what can you do? Are they all useless? Not really. You can store them in the database of thoughts, that is, the aggregate of perceptions, samna skandha. Keep them there until the next life and then continue to accumulate. After accumulating 3 great Asamkhya kalpas, you will finally execute and practice them one day, and then there is a chance to succeed. There is a quote by Albert Einstein, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. Therefore, you simply cannot explain it. If you understand it, you can simplify the complexities, explain something abstruse in plain and simple language, and to use metaphors to make the child to understand. So, some people say that this sentence should be interpreted in this way. The more complicated you have made on the surface of the matter, the less you will be able to understand the core contents of that matter. Because you are just beating around the bush and let the others to go around in circles, thus making others to be even more confused and were unable to understand what you are talking about. Now let me explain this sentence again, or to use the Buddhist holy Dharma as a metaphor. Its true meaning is, if you really understand the truth behind it, if you really understand the Heart Sutra, if you really understand the Diamond Sutra, you can naturally use the simplest, most direct, plainest, and clearest explanations to explain this whole matter, such that even a 6-year-old child will be able to understand it. Of course, can a 6-year-old child understand what is emptiness? Even if she cannot possibly understand it immediately in such a short time, with further listening to my explanations. In time, when one can upgrade one's knowledge and advance gradually and slowly, then one day, she will be able to understand it. Since you use the plainest way to teach him, her, she will finally understand it one day. Second, on the other hand, if you do not understand the truth of the matter, but your explanations will become very complicated, very confusing, very indirect, and very vague, so that everyone does not understand what you are talking about. So, if some people teach you the Buddhist holy Dharma in a way, in fact, many Dharma preachers deceive their followers in this way that they will only talk about a lot on the Buddhist holy Dharma with many Dharma jargons, yet without really explaining the actual contents and real meanings behind them. For example, when explaining the Heart Sutra, they fail to explain that it is talking about the state of affairs of the Dharma realm. They simply cannot explain it. If you ask them, what is meant by the 5 aggregates are all empty? Can we attain Buddhahood with the 5 aggregates are all empty? Exactly what needs to be done in order to achieve that? They also just cannot explain and make you understand all these. Many people have complained to me and said, Guru, I have been listening to the Buddhist holy Dharma elsewhere for many years. Whenever I asked those Dharma preachers what they meant, they always replied, your wisdom is not yet up to par. So, you won't be able to understand what I said. That is why you cannot understand it. Go home and ponder over it. No matter how many times I asked them, every time they just told me to go back and ponder over it again. As a result, I couldn't get answers to anything. So, I still don't understand. This is, indeed, to be known as the emperor's new clothes. It is simply a kind of deceptive lie. In fact, many Dharma preachers nowadays use this kind of lies to cover up their own ignorance and deceive their followers. This has caused their followers to have mistakenly believed that those Dharma propagators must have formidable achievements in their Dharma practices, which are indeed unfathomable. Isn't it unfathomable if it is beyond any description? Isn't it unfathomable if it has to be pondered over? Can you guess if you can understand, after 100 million years of pondering, that the Heart Sutra is talking about the state of affairs of the Dharma realm? After pondering for over 100 million years, if they still do not tell you, will you still be able to understand that the Heart Sutra explains the state of affairs of the Dharma realm, its operation and the situations inside? If they do not tell you about this, you are really not being able to understand it. In fact, they themselves do not understand or know about it at all. When you keep on asking them what the Heart Sutra is talking about, they simply could not explain it. So, they could only answer you in this way. But then, you would feel that it is really unfathomable. In fact, there is nothing in great depth about this. Actually, it is not that unfathomable. So long as you can understand it, you can then follow it to practice. How to practice and how to execute it is the actual test of your capability. If they cannot even explain to you on the part of understanding, how are you going to understand what they really said? Therefore, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni made a stipulation for all Dharma propagators. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni once warned all his disciples, "You must not use esoteric words and languages for Dharma propagation." The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni ordered all his disciples to use over 100 varieties of different Indian dialects to propagate the Buddhist holy Dharma, which must be made to be understood by the local people. They must explain the Buddhist holy Dharma in their native languages that the local people could best understand. Later, Pali was used uniformly. Pali was a colloquial language which was equivalent to the vernacular language, and one would easily understand it. If I explain the Buddhist holy Dharma in a series of classical Chinese, you will fall asleep without knowing what I am talking about. Therefore, it must be propagated in a colloquial manner. So, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni ordered that they were not allowed to use only beautiful and elegant style, such as Sanskrit, for the Dharma propagation. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni did not allow it. What was Sanskrit? That was the elegant language used by the upper castes in India. What was the upper caste? There was a caste system in India with distinct hierarchies or classes of people. At the top of the hierarchy were the Brahmins, who were the priesthood. The next level was the royal family and nobles, followed by the merchants and ordinary civilians. At the very bottom of this caste system were those to be considered as the untouchable. How could they possibly know the classical language? How could they possibly know Sanskrit? They only knew their own languages, right? So, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni ordered that Sanskrit was not allowed to be used for the Dharma propagation, which must be done in a language that the local people could understand. Because in general, the Brahmins, those people of the highest caste, had elites to teach them Sanskrit, but they still needed 12 years of study before they could master it. The common people simply did not understand Sanskrit at all. Do you know, in the first 500 years, that is, the first 500 years after the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's Mahaparinirvana, they all used colloquial languages for the Dharma propagation, so that some people were able to attain the various fruits of realization. In the next 500 years and beyond, they all switched to Sanskrit as writing started to appear at that time. After writing was invented, all educated people used Sanskrit for the Dharma propagation. As a result, no one could really understand it. Only a very few people could understand it, and so only a very few people could succeed in their Dharma practices. So, I am now explaining to you as to why there were people with certainty of realization, in the perfect age of the true Dharma. The first 500 years after the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's Mahaparinirvana. However, in the next 500 years people only knew how to sit for meditation, and so no one could succeed in their Dharma practices. This was the reason. It was because Sanskrit was being used later for the Dharma propagation, which had caused many people not being able to understand the Buddhist holy Dharma. As a result, only a very few people could really succeed in their Dharma practices. Therefore, the Buddhist holy Dharma became very difficult to understand later on. Our current Chinese Buddhist scriptures were translated from Sanskrit. Sanskrit was already a very tough language to master, yet when one had to translate it into classical Chinese, using beautiful phrases and some verses, this was even done much harder. So today, you cannot understand the Buddhist sutras because they did not follow the instructions of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. Simply because the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had already said that his disciples were not allowed to use Sanskrit for the Dharma propagation, but they still used Sanskrit deliberately. Hence, most of the Buddhist scriptures were written in Sanskrit. Of course, some of them were written in Pali, as some disciples did follow exactly the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's instructions. Not all of them were disobedient. Hence, some of the Buddhist scriptures were written in Pali, and were in a vernacular language format. So you can find that more of the Hinayana practitioners were able to read Pali scriptures. Some of them had reached a certain level of realization. Even though they could not attain Buddhahood, they would probably go to the high-level, heavenly realms. They could all have some achievements in their Dharma practices because they used the vernacular language to explain the Buddhist holy Dharma. They read the Pali scriptures as if they were reading the vernacular language format, and so it was much easier for them to understand. We are most unfortunate nowadays. We have used the Sanskrit scriptures. I do not know how well the translator understands Sanskrit, for that matter. The translator is Chinese, and he understands classical Chinese. But does he understand Sanskrit to the level of 100%, or only 60%? I have no idea. Suppose he knows and masters 60% of Sanskrit, and then translated it into classical Chinese. So when we read classical Chinese nowadays, how much can we really master? Maybe 20%, or even 10% of it. As such, will we be able to understand the true meanings in the Buddhist scriptures? No, we will not. As a result, many important things have been lost. This is the main difference between using the elegant language and the vernacular language. I have explained belief, understanding, action, and realization. The part of explanation, as part of understanding, is very important. For this part of explanation, whether it is in written or in spoken format, if you make such an explanation so esoteric that others need to look up the dictionary in order to understand it, it is equivalent to the spoiling of the Buddhist holy Dharma. This is, indeed, a violation of the precepts. Because if people cannot understand, you indirectly spoil the Buddhist holy Dharma. You might say, you called this a violation of the precepts. I don't buy it. You do not believe it. The first 500-year period was the certainty of liberation, during which some people could have become liberated from samsara successfully, and some had even attained Buddhahood. In the second 500-year period, there was only certainty of meditation, which means that many people could still excel in sitting meditation. But only a very few people had succeeded in their Dharma practices. It had already deteriorated to such a situation in the perfect age of the true Dharma. Do you still think that they had not violated the precepts? It was all because of the fact that they had switched to the using of Sanskrit, instead of using Pali, as the language for the Dharma propagation in the second 500-year period. Do you still argue that this is not enough evidence? Okay, I will show you the second piece of evidence. Take the Vinaya Pitaka, the Vinaya Maka Sutra, Volume 4, 4-part Vinaya Dharmaguptaka Vinaya, Volume 52, 5-part Vinaya Mahisasaka Vinaya, Volume 26. 10 recitations Vinaya Dasa Banavara Vinaya, Volume 38, Mula Sarvastivada Vinaya K Sudraka Vastu, Volume 6. All these scriptures are talking about the precepts. Their contents are all roughly the same, and they all talk about the same thing. It goes like this. I quoted the Pali texts, which are colloquial in nature. I did not quote classical texts as I am afraid you will not understand. I copied down the passage written in colloquial texts similar to the vernacular language to show you. The vernacular language is really good. It said, at that time, there were two bhikshus whose surnames were Yamaludikura, and they were two brothers. Originally, they were Brahmin nobles. They were originally born in a Brahmin family. All Brahmins were high-ranking nobles. The voices were good. Their voices were very nice to listen to. They were good with words at talking. They were good in communicating and speaking. They came to the world-honored one Bhagavan. They came to the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. They paid tribute and respect to the world-honored one Bhagavan. They made prostrations to the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. They then sat aside. After sitting down, the two bhikshus said to the world-honored one Bhagavan, Great Master. It was not translated as world-honored one Bhagavan, as the corresponding colloquial words would be the Great Master. They said, Great Master. Nowadays, bhikshus monks of different surnames, different names, different castes, that is, different hierarchies or classes, and different families all come to get ordained. To put it simply, people from all walks of life came to become monks. They said they have destroyed the Lord Buddha's teachings in their own dialects and slang. Their speech was neither elegant nor beautiful, as if vulgar language. This would ruin everything said by the Lord Buddha. The words spoken by the untouchables were nothing but vulgar language. These people all came to learn Buddhism and get ordained as monks. This was not feasible. It would ruin everything the Lord Buddha had said, which was so noble. Please allow us to express the Lord Buddha's words in Sanskrit. Let us all use Sanskrit uniformly for teaching the Buddhist holy Dharma from now on. Neither slangs nor inelegant words should be allowed. All of these should be forbidden. More than 100 kinds of texts should be forbidden. Only Sanskrit is allowed. What do you say, Lord Buddha? Both of them had such confidence in their ideas, thinking that such noble persons like themselves came to the Lord Buddha and proposed such noble suggestions. How could the Lord Buddha not accept their suggestions? Let us all use Sanskrit uniformly for teaching the Buddhist holy Dharma from now on. Neither slangs nor inelegant words should be allowed. All of these should be forbidden. More than 100 kinds of texts should be forbidden. Only Sanskrit is allowed. What do you say, Lord Buddha? Both of them had such confidence in their ideas, thinking that such noble persons like themselves came to the Lord Buddha and proposed such noble suggestions. How could the Lord Buddha not accept their suggestions? This was how the Lord Buddha responded. The world-honored one reprimanded them. The Lord Buddha immediately rebuked them and said, "You fools." The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni also used slang words in his Dharma teachings. He called them fools. That is, he was scolding them by saying that they were foolish. How dare you say that? How could you have such guts to say something like this? Please allow us to express the Lord Buddha's words in Sanskrit. How come you dare to say this sentence? The Lord Buddha had called them fools, that is, you are so foolish. The Lord Buddha was scolding them for being so foolish. It turned out that the way that the Lord Buddha had spoken was so approachable and easy to understand. He used the term fools to describe them. Wasn't it easy to understand? He did not even use any elegant words to scold them. This will not induce people who do not believe in Buddhism to believe in Buddhism. If you use Sanskrit to preach the Buddhist holy Dharma, you will not be unable to induce people to believe in Buddhism. In other words, for those people who do not believe in Buddhism, you cannot lead them to believe in Buddhism because they do not understand what you are talking about. Neither can it make those people who believe in Buddhism to further strengthen their faith. They have already believed in Buddhism, but they did not understand everything that you have said. Then they could not further strengthen their faith even though they want to so, simply because they did not understand what you were talking about. It can only increase the number of people who do not believe in Buddhism. You will help to increase the number of people who do not believe in Buddhism, and make those who already believed in Buddhism to change their beliefs. There are many other non-Buddhist religions and many different sects out there. Each of these sects will explain in local dialects that people can understand. They use slang words and the local people's own languages. Then, everybody can understand and think that what the non-Buddhist sects have said makes sense to them. On the contrary, what you Buddhists have said make no sense to them, since you have used the language that they could not understand, and so they simply did not believe in Buddhism. In this way, you would only encourage those people who do not believe in Buddhism to believe in other people instead. And you would also make those who have already believed in Buddhism to change their beliefs. Hence the world-honored one, Bhagavan, rebuked them for doing so, which was not allowed. After reprimanding them, he preached them the Buddhist holy Dharma once again. After rebuking them, the Lord Buddha further taught them the Buddhist holy Dharma once more. He then told the bhikshus. At the end of the talk, the Lord Buddha said to the bhikshus, "Bhikshus, you are not allowed to express the Buddha's words in Sanskrit. I am now giving you an order not to use Sanskrit for the preaching of the Buddhist holy Dharma." But after 500 years, nobody paid any more attention to this order by the Lord Buddha, and so everybody started to use Sanskrit instead. Violators will get Duskirta. Anyone who dares to violate this order that I am now giving will get Duskirta. So, actually, what is this Duskirta? Duskirta is the name given to a kind of misdemeanor for violating a certain precept. So, what is this precept? It is said in the four-part Vinaya that this kind of commitment of sin is like this. It means that you have committed two evil karmas, namely, the body karma, and the speech karma. That is to say, it does not matter if you use your body to write those words to express the Buddhist holy Dharma, or if you use your mouth to speak out and explain the Buddhist holy Dharma. As long as you have used the Sanskrit language to write on or to speak for the Buddhist holy Dharma, you are deemed to have already committed this kind of evil karma. What were the consequences of committing such evil karmas? Of course, there would be evil karmic retributions. What were those evil karmic retributions? That is not the main point. The main thing is to know that this is a violation of the precepts. You only need to know that it was a violation of the precepts. As I have said before, everyone had violated the precepts in the latter 500 years, that is, during the second 500 years of the perfect age of the true Dharma. As a consequence, the whole of Buddhism had been split apart into different sects later on. Any violations of the precepts would have evil karmic retributions. As a result, Buddhism was split into Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. That was the situation. They fought with each other. Well, this explains what is meant by the post-500-year period. So, let us go back and see what the Diamond Sutra had said. The Buddha said to Subhuti. The Lord Buddha told Subhuti, "Don't say such a thing." This was tantamount to scolding him. This sentence was pretty harsh. You must not say that in the future. You are not permitted to say that in the future. In short, even in the post-500-year period, after the Lord Buddha's Mahaparinirvana, that is, the first 500 years of the Dharma-ending age, which the Lord Buddha had described as the post-500-year period, at that time. In fact, he was referring to the first 500 years of the Dharma-ending age. But need not worry, we are now still in the Dharma semblance age, which means that we can still have a chance to attain the various fruits of realization, or even to attain Buddhahood. So, there is no need to worry. The Lord Buddha further said that there would still be some people who had strong hold with their precepts, and they would believe in it. Because, if you say such a thing, you are violating the precepts. So, when someone teaches the Diamond Sutra, and if you say, what you said is so abstruse, does anyone understand it? Then, when you have said such a thing, you have immediately violated the precept already. All of you must never say like this. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had already ordered all of you. When you say such a thing, these words might be overheard by those people next to you. They originally believed in the Diamond Sutra, and were working hard to understand it. But now that you have said, would anyone believe it? It is so abstruse. It first says so and so, and then says it is not so and so. It says something exists, and then later says it does not exist. It just doesn't make sense. Those people who were next to you had believed it at first, but now they no longer believe in it anymore after hearing what you have said. And instead they would just go back to recite, Namo Buddha Amitabha. In this way, you will be in great trouble. You have violated a major precept. You will drag them into their deathbeds, that is, you will get them into great troubles. How is it that you will get them into great troubles? I will tell you later how you will get them into great troubles. Upon hearing these chapters and sentences, there may arise in them a single thought of pure belief. As long as someone who hears these words that I am saying now and develops a thought of pure belief, just one thought with earnest belief. Elder Subhuti, do you know this? Tathagatas know and see all. All Buddhas will immediately know that this person has a thought in giving rise to this pure belief. All the Buddhas know of this person. All the Buddhas see that this person has a thought of pure belief. Do you know what kind of benefits would there be for those beings to have been known by all the Buddhas? When reciting the Namo Buddha Amitabha, you have to recite, without any disturbance of thoughts for 1 to 7 days. Only with such a high level of meditational power would you be able to make any connections with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, in letting them know that you are calling for help, so that they would come to your rescue. You need to recite extremely hard in order to have a chance to make connections with the Buddha. But now, with just one thought of pure belief on these chapters and sentences, with such a pure faith that you truly believe and feel that they are, indeed, the real truths, you will then make Tathagatas know and see all. That is, you can be known and seen by all the Buddhas. You can then be connected with all the Buddhas immediately. It will, indeed, be hard for you not to be saved. These sentient beings will thus acquire such immeasurable virtuous merits. Thus, in this way, this sentient being can receive immeasurable virtuous merits. Why? In fact, it is very difficult to enter the heavenly realm. You have to accumulate a lot of virtuous merits even for just entering into the low-level, heavenly realms. If you recite the Namo Buddha Amitabha, you have to recite, without any disturbance of thoughts for 1 to 7 days. Even if you recite extremely hard, you still do not know if you can succeed or not. It is just that there is a chance, but you may not succeed in entering into the Buddha's pure land. Now that you have already acquired immeasurable virtuous merits. What does it really mean by gaining immeasurable virtuous merits? It means that one can really enter into the Buddha's pure land. Why is this so? How do we explain it? These sentient beings no longer abide in the notions of a self, of others, of sentient beings, or of longevity. They neither abide in the notions of Dharma, nor abide in the notions of non-Dharma. I will explain it now once more. The Diamond Sutra has 2 oral pith instructions, with one of them as, should not abide anywhere and do not abide in notions. That is, your mind should not abide in any one place, any one thought, any one notion, appearance, or form, nor in any one view. You should not be attached to anywhere. Do not abide in any notions, appearances, or forms. What does it really mean? It means not to abide in the notions of the 6 dusts. I have explained it before. You can re-watch the Visualization Practice of Compassion and Bodhicitta series on the 7th episode, which provided a detailed explanation of non-abiding in the notions of the 6 dusts. I will not repeat it again here and now. The notions of the six dusts are those things in this secular world that will attract you. You should not be attached to them. At the same time, you also should not abide in the four notions. What are the four notions? Again, you can re-watch the Visualization Practice of Compassion and Bodhicitta series on the 6th episode. What are they? Notion of a self. I will explain it just in a short while. As long as you do not abide in the notions of six dusts, and the four notions. As long as you achieve should not abide anywhere and do not abide in notions, not clinging on to any one notion, appearance, or form, any one thought, or any one view. So long as you can have this one thought of non-abiding, just one thought, then you can already have all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to be connected with you immediately. All of them can know and see you, and you will have acquired immeasurable virtuous merits. It will be very hard, indeed, for you not to go to the Buddha's Pure Land by then. Why is this possible with just having one thought of pure belief? Because by having this one thought of pure belief is equivalent to the restoring of one thought of perfect enlightenment. Because should not abide anywhere and do not abide in notions can only be achieved with 100% of perfect enlightenment, the truly realizing and understanding ability without any deviations. You only need to have one thought, even if it lasts for only a very, very short moment of 1/20th of a second. In short, so long that you can give rise to this pure belief in just one thought, you can restore this 100% of perfect enlightenment intrinsic awareness for the time period of one thought. In other words, you have already been interconnected to the perfect enlightenment intrinsic awareness of all the Buddhas. Does that make sense to you? Hence, Tathagatas know and see all. All the Buddhas know it because your intrinsic awareness has been interconnected with theirs, which is the same 100% of perfect enlightenment. Now that you have restored this one thought of perfect enlightenment, you have already been interconnected with all of them, and so they can all know and see you immediately. Initially, you and all the Buddhas are all separated from each other. What is really blocking you from them? Those deluded thoughts of your own mind are, in fact, blocking you from all the Buddhas. Initially, there was no such connection being established between you and them, but now there is. So, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni and all Buddhas can now know and see you, and as such, you can acquire immeasurable virtuous merits. So, you have to remember that the Dharma realm refers to the state of oneness, while the three realms refer to those dualistic and/or multiplistic states. If we want to attain Buddhahood, we will have to enter into the Dharma realm. In other words, we have to restore back to the situations of the state of oneness. We are now in the three realms, either a dualistic or multiplistic states of affairs. It means that we would always make comparisons between this and that, making all sorts of comparing processes. There are two or more kinds of things that have existed which prevent us to be unable to return to that state of oneness. Therefore, we just cannot enter into the Dharma realm, nor can we restore our intrinsic awareness. If you can restore it, it would mean that you will have the opportunity to enter into the Dharma realm. Just that, one thought, would mean that you will have the opportunity to enter into the Dharma realm, and even have the opportunity to stay there. Isn't this the same as obtaining immeasurable virtuous merits? You know what? You no longer need to make contacts with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas by reciting their names, without any disturbance of thoughts for 1 to 7 days. Instead, you will be able to get the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to come and protect you immediately. Because you have used this one thought of perfect enlightenment to make contacts with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which of course is the fastest way to do so. I have once told you about the mind. The speed of the mind is much faster than the speed of light, while the speed of light is much faster than the speed of sound. If you just use the speed of sound to recite Namo Buddha Amitabha, it is simply like the difference between a car and a rocket. The rocket arrives within an instant, while the car is still running on the ground. It will take you a really long time to arrive at the destination. Hence, if you start harassing others and violating the precepts by saying that it is so abstruse, it says that something does exist and then says it does not exist, will anyone believe it, while others are explaining the Diamond Sutra, or that they are listening to the Diamond Sutra on the YouTube? If the person next to you really does not believe in the teachings after listening to your opinions, then the evil karmas that has been planted by you will be extremely heavy, that you will not even know which levels of the hell realm you will be fallen into one day. In the future, you will no longer have the opportunity to hear of the Buddhist scriptures, neither will you have the opportunity to hear these oral pith instructions. Thus, you must never violate these precepts. When you have this one thought being aroused, this behavioral formula and programming will be stored in your aggregate of perceptions, samna skanda, that is the database of your thoughts, as well as your behavioral formulae and programmings. In other words, after you die in the future, you might unintentionally be able to enter into the Dharma realm. And so there is a chance for this behavioral formula and programming to become functional. There is a chance, but not definitely. Of course, you will still need to be taught by your guru and to get his guidance in real practices before you can really apply them. But it is such an opportunity, since you have something extra, this programming, which you can keep for the next life or the life after next, such that it might still give you a chance to make a successful restoration. This is very important, indeed. That is why it is called immeasurable virtuous merits. Only with immeasurable virtuous merits can you be able to make it possible. As such, this is how you can make it. You might then easily have the opportunity to enter into the Dharma realm, and even to attain Buddhahood in the future. So, this is what immeasurable really means. Being immeasurable means that it will be stored in your aggregate of perceptions, samna skanda, life after life, so that you will have the opportunity to make use of it in the future. This is a kind of assistance to you immeasurably, so it is called immeasurable virtuous merits. It is a kind of endless assistance, so this is called immeasurable virtuous merits. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni continued to explain. Why is this so? How do we explain it? These sentient beings no longer abide in the notions of a self, of others, of sentient beings, or of longevity. They neither abide in the notions of Dharma, nor abide in the notions of non-Dharma. Oh, how abstruse is this? What is this talking about? The notion of a self is a kind of clinging onto the mind and thoughts of one's own self. Many people have strong attachments. If you point out their minor mistakes, they will find back all the emails and confront you one by one, insisting that there is nothing wrong with them. They would not admit their mistakes whatsoever. Their ego attachment is so strong and heavy, such that it is impossible to teach them anything. What is the notion of others? The notion of others is the kind of clinging onto the mind and thoughts of the other people. They would often complain, rebuke, and curse others. They would claim that all those were the others' faults, that they were being scolded by the guru. They would put all the blames onto others, instead of reflecting upon oneself for introspection. These are called the notion of others, which means the clinging onto others. What is the notion of sentient beings? This is the clinging onto the minds and thoughts of other kinds of sentient beings. For example, I like my pet dog very much. I love it so much that I would rather not enter her into the Dharma realm, so that we can stick together forever. As a result, both of you will end up suffering within the cycles of reincarnations, not knowing what rebirth will I take with my next reincarnation, and neither knowing what rebirth the other sentient being will take with her next reincarnation. You two would still be separated. Both of you will continue to take rebirths life after life within this ocean of sufferings. You will not know if you'll take rebirth as a pig or any other animal this time. Is there any difference between pets or animals, after all? In this way, you would keep on floating and sinking within this ocean of sufferings just for the sake of those short-lived things that you love and cling on to. This is no good. Next, the notion of longevity. What is it really? I want to have longevity, I want to have eternal life, and I want to go to the Buddha's Pure Lands. I want to practice this Buddhist holy Dharma again by now. I want to visualize on this deity by now. I have already received more than 30 empowerments. Wow, this deity called Vajrakalaya is very powerful. He has 3 heads and 6 arms holding many Vajra instruments. He is really awesome. There is no doubt that he can help me. In any case, I must have to recognize him and to visualize his features. In fact, do you know that those instruction or practice manuals sadhanas on visualizing these deities have to be induced into emptiness at the end? You cannot succeed without inducing them into emptiness. Furthermore, if you have a bad nature of mind, it will drag you down into hell. Do you know that your nature of mind might drag you down into hell? If you visualize such a vicious appearance, your nature of mind might also be affected and become vicious while incorrectly practicing those dharma. This is, indeed, a big issue. Hence, all such kind of practices are those dharma practices of abiding in notions. The notion of longevity means that I can visualize on the Buddha Amitabha. I am now visualizing on the Buddha Amitabha while chanting Namo Buddha Amitabha, so I can definitely go to the Buddha's Pure Land. In this way, even if you can enter into the Dharma realm, you will eventually fall out of it simply because your mind only concentrates towards going to the Buddha's Pure Land, rather than in the attainment of Buddhahood. In this way, you will definitely fall back into the 3 realms. You will fall back out of the Dharma realm, as this is what you want, and so for sure you will get it. But, then, the falling out from the Dharma realm does not necessarily mean that you can go to the Buddha's Pure Land. You might not be able to enter into the Buddha's Pure Land. But, definitely, you will reincarnate and continue to reincarnate. Why is it that we must not abide in all of those notions as has been mentioned above? It is because we have to achieve this fusion into one. What are the characteristics of the Dharma realm upon entering into it? Everything has to be merged into oneness. But if you insist on clinging onto the notion of a self, and say that, I would rather die than to admit my mistakes. I would rather die than to make a repentance. In this way, you are strongly attached to this notion of a self. So how can you ever be able to merge with everything? In other words, you will surely enter back into the cycle of karmic existence, but you will not be able to enter into the Dharma realm, and stay over there. No way for you. Because you cling on to those notions of a self, and of others, you just cannot achieve the state of fusion into one. That is, it is impossible to achieve the state of all-pervasiveness. If you cannot achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, your Dharma nature cannot be restored. When the Dharma nature is restored to 100%, then it can achieve the state of all-pervasiveness. Your realizing and knowing ability awareness of the perfect enlightenment can achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, ubiquitous and existing everywhere. But if you're attached to one place, how can you be all-pervasive? If you cling on to one point, you will only be at that certain point, and can never be all-pervasive. Then, how can you possibly achieve the state of fusion into one? That is to say, you will definitely fall out from the Dharma realm, and have no way to attain Buddhahood. This means that you will forever be trapped in the cycle of karmic existence. So, this is why the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had said, you must not abide in notions anymore. If you are capable of not abiding in notions, even just for one thought, all the Buddhas will know and see that you have immediately restored that one thought of perfect enlightenment. All the Buddhas will know and see that, and that you can also accumulate immeasurable virtuous merits. Thus, you have to remember that the characteristics of the Dharma realm, and of the perfect enlightenment, are the states of fusion into one, and of all-pervasiveness. Then, what is meant by they neither abide in the notions of Dharma, nor abide in the notions of non-Dharma? The notions of Dharma means that you are attached to some of those methods by which you can attain Buddhahood, or by which you can be reborn into the Buddha's pure land. This is known as the notions of Dharma. Neither abide in the notions of Dharma means that you cannot have these thoughts of attachment. I said before, what is a notion? It is a thinking pattern, a thought, or a view. So, what does it really mean? Let me give you an example. Isn't the method of attaining Buddhahood important? You explained the Diamond Sutra to teach me the methods of attaining Buddhahood. But then you asked me not to be attached to them, and also try to do without them at the end. Wow, does that mean that there is nothing at all? Yet, the answer to this question is no, it is not that there is nothing at all. There is still the ability of realizing and knowing, awareness that exists. So how do we practice the Holy Dharma? I have already given so many lectures to explain this to you by now, haven't I? It might take another dozens more of lectures in order to teach you further on it. Now this is only the 11th episode, we still have a long way to go and not quite there yet. But I will explain to you a bit more about why we must not be attached to them all. Let me give you an example. The Heart Sutra has an oral pith instruction on the 5 aggregates are all empty. If you want to stay within the state of Dharma realm, you must do one thing. You must empty the 5 aggregates, that is, the 5 databases must have to be emptied. Everyone has a chance to enter into the Dharma realm after death, right? If, supposedly, after you have died, you entered into the Dharma realm. After entering into the Dharma realm, if you keep on thinking about the 5 aggregates, the oral pith instruction in the Heart Sutra is about the 5 aggregates, which include the aggregate of perceptions, the aggregate of mental formations, and the aggregate of sensations, and so on. Would you still have sensations by now? Would you still now have a database of thoughts in operation? If so, you will fall out. You will fall out from the Dharma realm, and will go back into the 3 realms. Actually, is your aggregate of perceptions still in operation? Do your greedy thoughts for material substances still continue to exist? If you're attached to the 5 aggregates are all empty, and constantly concerned and clinging on to the thought as to whether I have emptied the 5 aggregates or not by now, have I cleared up all those 5 databases? With all these constant attachments, what would happen to you next? You would most likely fall back into the 3 realms, and will continue with your reincarnations. So, what does that mean? You are still constantly clinging on to either existence or non-existence. Do you know what existence or non-existence is all about? What will happen that exists and does not exist? It is something that happens in the dualistic or multiplistic states. Only the Dharma realm is the state of oneness. So, if you abide in the notions of Dharma, that is, if you are attached to that place, then a dualistic state will appear. If you're attached to a certain point, you can never achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, and neither can you achieve the state of fusion into one. So long as you are attached to one point, you will not be able to achieve the state of all-pervasiveness. That was why when I talked to you about the notion of emptiness before, you should not even be attached to the notion, form, or appearance of emptiness. If you're attached to any kind of notion, form, or appearance, it is equivalent to your being attached to a certain point, and you will be trapped right at that point. Because the Dharma realm belongs to the state of oneness, and the three realms belong to the dualistic and/or multiplistic states. What we have to do now is to try and merge the Dharma realm with the three realms as oneness. Everything has to be integrated into that state of oneness before we can attain Buddhahood and can stay within the Dharma realm. Therefore, we must not have any notion of Dharma. Neither abide in the notion of Dharma means that there is no such a thing, for it is just a method, and you should not cling on to it. Nor abide in the notions of non-Dharma. What is the notion of non-Dharma? The notion of non-Dharma means that you cling on to the emptying of all the methods and of everything, and even of the realizing and knowing ability awareness itself. In short, nothing is there, and even there is no realizing and knowing ability awareness left, just like a piece of wood. Nothing is there, no thoughts, just nothing, and no realizing and knowing ability awareness. This is known as the notion of non-Dharma. Some people have explained it in this way. The notions of Dharma refer to some of those methods that can help you go to the Buddha's Pure Lands, or to assist you in attaining Buddhahood. Anything that are not these methods, or those wrong methods, or those things that have nothing to do with these methods will all be considered as the notions of non-Dharma. You can also explain it like this. But there are also many other people who have explained the notions of non-Dharma by referring to those who keep on saying that everything has to be emptied, due to their misinterpretations of the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra says, no old age and death, or no ending of old age and death. To them, that is to say, there is nothing, as there is nothing at all. And so this includes the realizing and knowing ability awareness. To them, even this does not exist. This kind of extreme situation is known as the insensate voidness, or simply stubborn emptiness, which is extremely wrong, with a wrong and false interpretation of what emptiness is all about. That is to say, one does not have the realizing and knowing ability awareness during her Dharma practice, and that is very dangerous indeed. And so it is said in the Diamond Sutra, they neither abide in the notions of Dharma, nor abide in the notions of non-Dharma. Why? When you often make judgments, this is the notion of Dharma, and if I practice, the five aggregates are all empty, I can stay in the Dharma realm. This is the notion of non-Dharma, the insensate voidness. As a result, even when I have entered into the Dharma realm, I am still wondering as to whether this actually belongs to the notion of non-Dharma, or to the notion of Dharma. This is no good. If I am of notion of non-Dharma, then I won't be able to stay there. Why? Because you have aroused a dualistic opposition of having either existence or non-existence, or that there is the existence of something that is dualistic or multiplistic in nature. Immediately, you would have no way to achieve the fusion into one, since you could not achieve that state of oneness, and so you would fall out from the Dharma realm. That was why the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had mentioned this sentence, so as to ask you to clear all those notions, forms, or appearances, clear all those thoughts, and clear all those views. What was it for? It was there to help you in achieving the fusion into one, and the state of all-pervasiveness, in order to stay within the Dharma realm. So please remember, abide means to stay. And thus, not abiding in those notions, forms, or appearances is for the sake of achieving the fusion into one, and thus enabling you to stay within the Dharma realm. Why? Because all things will appear simply because of the temporary displays of the Dharma nature. Hence, in having any notions, forms, or appearances, any thoughts, or any views, is a kind of projection and manifestation of your own Dharma nature. All are unreal delusions, that is, they are all illusions, false fabrications. If you can understand this and can merge all of them into oneness. What is this oneness? This oneness is the Dharma nature, that is, if you take all the illusory things back and merge all of them into the Dharma nature, knowing that they are just pure projections of the Dharma nature, not clinging onto them and abide there, then you will be able to achieve the fusion into one. If you cannot make it, what are the consequences? If you cannot do it, you are still attached to those notions, forms, or appearances. And then you will continue to reincarnate because you will fall out from the Dharma realm, and back into the three realms. So, should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions is tantamount to the notion of Dharma, and is also tantamount to the notion of non-Dharma, at the same time. So, these two oral pith instructions are equivalent to that you must not be attached to anything, dualistic or multiplistic, in nature. Such as this is the notion of Dharma, this is not id notion of Dharma, this is the notion of others, this is not id notion of others, this is the notion of a self, and so on. You must have to merge them all into oneness in order to make it possible. You must not cling onto any notions, forms, or appearances. You mustn't cling onto and abide by, nor to stay in any one place. Otherwise, you will be trapped. You have to realize and know what these really are. You need to have this realizing and knowing ability, awareness, and know what these really are. Whether it is a pig or an orange that has been projected, you need to know what it really is, but you cannot further clinging onto it without letting go. Because when you abide in, dwell upon, or cling onto it without letting go, it means that you will stay there, and you will be trapped. But if you do not abide in there, you will not be trapped at that point. This kind of realizing and knowing ability, awareness, is known as non-voidness, and it is not completely empty. Not clinging onto something without letting go, not clinging onto existence without letting go, is known as neither existence. These are the true understanding and mastery of emptiness, neither existence nor voidness. If you can apply them all, you can then enter into the Dharma realm, and can even stay there until attain Buddhahood. Why is this so? The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni continued to explain, if these sentient beings adopt such notions in their minds, if the minds of all sentient beings often like to cling onto those notions, forms, or appearances, such as, this man is very handsome, that girl is so pretty, this one is ugly, that one is very beautiful, this is a bad guy, this so and so often harms me. If you often abide in there, clinging onto those notions, forms, or appearances, thoughts, or views, and even if you take empowerments and learn those instruction and practice manuals, sadhanas, and then cling onto the visualizations of deities, such as the Buddha Amitabha, but not knowing how to induce them all into emptiness, then you will most probably not being able to enter into the Dharma realm, and to attain Buddhahood. Simply because you are already trapped at one point, and you cannot achieve the state of all-pervasiveness. If you are being trapped in the thought of, I want to visualize in becoming Buddha Amitabha, in such a way that you cannot achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, then you just cannot recover your 100% perfect enlightenment, in order to attain Buddhahood. The next sentence, if they adopt the notions of Dharma, that means they are being attached to the notions of a self, others, sentient beings, and longevity. This is still the same that you are being attached to the notions of Dharma. You are still attached and cling onto those notions, that is, the four notions. You are also trapped at one point, and so you just cannot attain Buddhahood. Why is this so? If they adopt the notions of non-Dharma, it means that they are attached to the notions of a self, others, sentient beings, and longevity. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni repeated this one more time. If your mind adopts those notions, whether those notions of Dharma or those of non-Dharma, you are equally attached to those notions, that is, the four notions. What are the four notions? The notion of a self, the notion of others, the notion of sentient beings, and the notion of longevity. Equally, you are being trapped at one point and so you are just unable to achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, and thus cannot recover your 100% perfect enlightenment, in order to attain Buddhahood. Therefore, one should not adopt the notions of Dharma, and one should neither adopt the notions of non-Dharma. So, you should not adopt or cling on to those things by saying, "This is the Dharma that can help me to attain Buddhahood," or to go to the Buddha's Pure Lands, or to say that these are not Dharma. You should not adopt these non-Dharma. It is thus even not possible to adopt such non-Dharma. Right. Because of this, if you have to distinguish between those of the Dharma and those of the non-Dharma, such that when you want to distinguish and cling on to them, you will then have those dualistic or multiplistic states to be emerged, and thus you would not be able to achieve the state of fusion into one. You simply could not achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, and thus could not attain Buddhahood. This is the reason why, therefore, according to this meaning and principle, the Tathagata always said, "I have been telling you very often. You bhikshus, you monks, should know that the Dharma I expound, you know that this is what I am saying, is likened to a raft. Even Dharma should be abandoned, let alone non-Dharma. Let me make a metaphor. You are now going to cross the river to the opposite bank. Your goal is to get to the opposite bank, that is, your goal is to attain Buddhahood. Now you want to cross the river, but you don't know how to swim, neither do you know how to fly. So, you want to make a raft, and then row this raft will arrive at the opposite bank. Will you still bring the raft along with you after having gone ashore? After that, will you still walk with the raft on your back? Will you do this? Surely not, because the raft is a just tool, a method that can help you to attain Buddhahood. As you have already entered into the Dharma realm, you have mastered and understood the characteristics of staying within the Dharma realm, and so you can already stay there. Since you have already entered into the Dharma realm, you should no longer cling on to things like, what is the right method? What is the wrong method? What will make me fall back into the three realms? Why are you still being attached to all of these things? You should simply abide in that state comfortably, and then you can just stay there. Of course, there are still some other things that need to be incorporated. All in all, there is one thing, and it is just talking about the same thing, namely, even Dharma should be abandoned. You should not cling on to all those methods, and you have to abandon them as if abandoning the raft. You should not walk around the Dharma realm with the raft on your back, or else you will have to fall back out of the Dharma realm. Let alone non-Dharma, not to mention those methods that cannot help you to attain Buddhahood and to stay within the Dharma realm. You shouldn't even adopt them at all, right? To put it simply, please do not be trapped at one point. Otherwise, you will not be able to achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, and you will not be able to recover your 100% perfect enlightenment, in order to attain Buddhahood. After all, is there anyone who never practiced or understood the Buddhist holy Dharma before, can happen to enter into the Dharma realm, and can understand what I have said before, but then fell out from the Dharma realm again due to the missing of something? So, what exactly has she been missing? Let us take a look now. One of the characteristics of our Dharma realm is the state of fusion into one. It was back in 2011 when we had invited 3 of the world's top experts on near-death experiences NDEs to Hong Kong to deliver their research studies. One of the experts was Dr. Peter Fenwick, who said that, "I once interviewed a person who had once entered into a realm. What he said was very interesting, but we did not understand it. I can show it to you by now. He should be talking about something like the unity of the universe. But there was something that I simply did not understand. What is this fusion into one? Why is this fusion into one necessary?" He gave us this set of clips so that we could explain them during our own lectures. So, I will play these clips for you now. You can see how an ordinary person could also experience some of the things, which I have mentioned before, after entering into the Dharma realm. He could experience some of the things as was mentioned in the Diamond Sutra, but he could not apply them. Hence, he had to fall out from the Dharma realm. Now let us have a look at what he had said.
I've got into the habit, when I'm talking to my wife and knowing that I'm coming to do this, that's the answer. One. Not my finger. One. That's all there is. There is no you, there is no me, there is no God. You are part of, we are, everything. It's one. You're one part, forever and ever. It changes. It wouldn't matter to me if the scientists are right, and they probably are, that the universe began from the Big Bang, from a singularity. It may or may not collapse back. It doesn't matter. It's one whole. We are part of it. It always has been, always will be. There is no creator. It's one.
He kept holding up a finger as a sign of oneness, and then kept on saying, one. What is meant by oneness? As I have explained before, this one is to merge all the things to the state of fusion into one. He said that he could not tell the difference between you and me, the universe, and so on. There is no such distinction anymore. Did you hear what he said? He said there is no way to distinguish and separate things. We are part of each other, for everyone is fused together, and both you and I are part of it. Everyone is merged together. You are in me, and I am in you. In short, what he meant is in the state of fusion into one. He said that he had entered into that realm. In fact, that was the Dharma realm, but which he did not know what it was. Yet he had a strong feeling that everything was merged into the state of fusion into one. We are now within the three realms, and we are still practicing as to how to achieve this state of fusion into one. But, even without practicing, he could naturally feel it after he had entered into the Dharma realm. But, then, why did he finally fall out from there? He already knew this state of fusion into one. He knew that it was one. But did he not know what this oneness really represent? And also did he know how to continue on within it? That is to say, in fact, if you can enter into the Dharma realm, you will know that everything is merged together into the state of fusion into one, even without practicing. You don't need my explanations, and neither do you need the explanations from the Diamond Sutra for your understanding. You can still know all that, just like this gentleman, Mr. Allen. He did not understand the Buddhist holy Dharma, but he could still know about this state of fusion into one. And yet, he still fell out from the Dharma realm, back into this three realms. Why was this so? It is because our Buddhist holy Dharma has already talked about belief, understanding, action, and realization. As for the understanding part, suppose that he had already believed in it by now. When he had entered into the Dharma realm, it was like, wow. I now immediately believed in it, simply because everything has been merged into oneness. Why do I have the feeling that I am no longer different from you? All those four notions were gone. Everything is in the state of fusion into one. There is no more you or me. He already had the belief, and he also had an understanding of it. He could already explain that this is one, and that all things had been merged together into the state of fusion into one. It is one, he kept on saying. Do you know it is one? In short, it is one. He kept on repeating this over and over again, but he could not explain it properly. Yet, he felt that he had already understood it. He had a successful understanding of it, but he could not execute it, that is, no action. Hence, he failed to realize it, that is, no realization. As a result, he finally had to fall out from the Dharma realm. This has shown one thing. Since he had never heard of the explanations on the Diamond Sutra, and so he would understand such happenings. Although he had entered into the Dharma realm, he thought he had the understanding of it, but he could not achieve the next level on action. How do you execute it? How do you stay within the Dharma realm? Now that you have believed in it and have understood it, also knew that it has to be in the state of fusion into one. But, then, you still did not fused into it. Could you really achieve the state of all-pervasiveness? Did you notice that he was unable to inform you about the state of all-pervasiveness? You might argue that since he had mentioned that everything is one, that was merged together, he must thus have been referring to the state of all-pervasiveness. However, did he really understand this? He was unable to speak it out, he just mentioned one. Could he really execute this? No. It was simply because he failed to execute it, and so he had to fall out from the Dharma realm. It was mentioned in the latter part of the clip. However, due to time constraints, I did not show that part to you. He said, I am so eager to go back there. That represents the eternity. I know that it is the final answer. If I can enter into there again, I will succeed. If I can enter into there again, all sufferings will disappear. It was so happy over there, and the happiness is indescribable. This was what he had said in one of those clips, which I will not replay it here. You can re-watch the 7th episode of the Mind Training series on the YouTube. This episode includes his entire interview, and you can re-watch it. I have added the explanations to it. But, this time, I specially selected this clip to tell you that the characteristic of the Dharma realm is the state of fusion into one. Nevertheless, even if you have understood this, and suppose that you do not execute it, or to follow a guru who can guide you in your Dharma practice and train you with such programming, and to immediately correct you when you are wrong. Once you have reached that tipping point, it will happen extremely fast. It is so fast that you might have fallen out of it just after having a few thoughts to arise. This is because you have gone in the wrong direction. It is very easy to go in the wrong direction. It was precisely because of this that Alan had fallen out from the Dharma realm. He fully understood it, and he could even explain that it is one, and asked you to remember. It is one, to have this state of fusion into one, yet, he still fell out from the Dharma realm. So, that is why it is necessary to practice the holy Dharma. Dharma practice is to execute what you have understood. You have to try and turn it into something very proficient, in order to keep you away from failing again. Only then can you be able to realize it and to attain Buddhahood. That was why the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had said, if those sentient beings adopt notions in their minds, if all those sentient beings adopt those notions in their minds, which means that their minds are attached to a certain point, this should not be done. If they adopt notions in their minds, if they adopt the notion of dharmas, if they adopt the notion of non-dharmas, all these are abiding in notions. When there is abiding in notions, there is no way to achieve the state of fusion into one, and there is no way to achieve the state of all-pervasiveness. Although this Alan had never listened to my explanations, he knew how to accomplish this state of fusion into one. Yet, he could not achieve the state of all-pervasiveness, and so he could not recover his 100% of perfect enlightenment to attain Buddhahood. This was what he had missed. Now I will explain this part, but I will go a bit faster. When the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was about to enter into Mahaparinirvana, he took a group of disciples to Kusinara Kushinagar. He was prepared to go to the grove of Shaurya Robusta, where he was ready to enter into Mahaparinirvana. Then, before his Mahaparinirvana, he reminded all his disciples to do one thing as soon as possible. He said, "This is far too important. Before I leave, I must remind you again. All of you, every disciple, have never listened to me even though I have said it 1,000,000 times. Now that I am leaving very soon and before I go, I will say this one more time. Please repent as soon as possible. In case even if you have entered into the Dharma realm, after you die, just because you have not yet repented your sins, you will be pulled back by your mind's tractional forces. As a result, you will simply fall out and miss the opportunity again." So, even when the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was about to enter into Mahaparinirvana, he still continued to remind all his disciples right away and said, "Please repent as soon as possible." By then, were there disciples who had obeyed him? I suppose there were, but did all of them obey? I don't think so. You can know the facts from the way his disciples fought against each other later on. After the Lord Buddha's Mahaparinirvana, they all gathered together to hold the first Buddhist council. When they first gathered to recite out and then assemble what the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had said, they already scolded against each other. They blamed and scolded each other. So, did they really listen to the Lord Buddha's final advice? I can't guarantee it. The Lord Buddha also preached the solemn Mahayana Sutra of Holy Great Liberation on vast repentance to eliminate sins and to become a Buddha. Or simply the Sutra of the Great Liberation, for short. What does this sutra say? Why did the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni preach this sutra before he left? Before death, most people will talk about all of their final wishes. For example, how do they want their bank accounts to be handled? How do they want their estates, legacies and heritages to be distributed? Etc. They will leave the best things to their posterity. It was the same for the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. He said, "I am leaving now. I will leave the best things to you. I will teach you the Sutra of the Great Liberation." How can you achieve the Great Liberation? How can you be successfully liberated? How can you be liberated from the cycle of karmic existence and not to be constrained? It is too miserable to be reborn as either a pig or a dog. How can you attain Buddhahood, or to be liberated from samsara? The only way is through repentance of sins. So, what did the Sutra of the Great Liberation Sutra talk about? It is talking about the most perfect, the most extensive, and the most in-depth and profound repentance to you all. It explains that repentance can eliminate sins, and thus this is called the repentance to eliminate sins. If one can successfully eliminate one's sins, one can then be more easily be able to stay within the Dharma realm, without much interference. So, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was very anxious and really concerned about his disciples, and so he repeated again and again, "Please repent as soon as possible." Furthermore, repentance can eliminate sins, and thus enabling you to attain Buddhahood. This sutra mentions that it is necessary to repent as soon as possible in order to eliminate all sins, and thus enabling you to attain Buddhahood. The whole sutra talks about all these things. It is thus conceivable that repentance is, indeed, most vital. Then, you might ask, do we need to abide in notions for repentance? No, I am not asking you to cling on to it at all. Once the repentance is over, then you will have to put it down. Just like you are using the raft to travel to the opposite bank, but once you are there, you will not keep on carrying the raft on your back upon arrival, will you? Repentance is a method for you to stay easily within the Dharma realm, and to attain Buddhahood. It is not for you to carry it on your back and to continue in making repentance even when you have reached the Dharma realm. That is not what it means. So, you must remember this. Someone had asked me about the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. In the chapter on the posthumous teachings, section 1, Venerable Ananda asked the Lord Buddha for instructions. That is, Venerable Ananda said to the Lord Buddha, "World-honored one, you are going to leave us now. I have 4 important questions that I would like to ask for your revelations. World-honored one, after you have entered into Mahaparinirvana, firstly, who shall be our teacher?" He said, "After you leave us, who shall we look for to be our teacher?" The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni replied, "Take the precepts as your teacher. If you use the precepts to be your guru, you will have no problem. Of course, is it just enough to use the precepts? It all depends on who had asked the Lord Buddha this question. It was Venerable Ananda, one of the 10 principal disciples, who had asked the question. How many years had Venerable Ananda listened to the Lord Buddha's Dharma teachings? He had followed the Lord Buddha as his primary attendant for more than 20 years, and so he had already heard the Lord Buddha's Dharma teachings for many years. How would you answer when such a person who had been listening to the Lord Buddha's Dharma teachings for so many years asked the Lord Buddha, "Who shall be our teacher?" He had already learned everything, but what else did he lack? It was the lack of precepts. Hence, he could use the precepts to be his guru. How about all of you? Besides the fact that you must have to use the precepts as your guru, and on top of that, you still need to have a guru who will teach and guide you in person. For example, in teaching you how to practice the Diamond Sutra, how to visualize in real practice, and how to execute your Dharma practice. In terms of understanding, you have already heard of it on the YouTube. But in terms of your execution in the real practice, how should you go about doing it? You will still need a guru to teach you. But it was Venerable Ananda that the Lord Buddha was addressing, and so he would surely just answered, "Take the precepts as your teacher." It did not make sense to ask Venerable Ananda to find other gurus. It was not appropriate to respond in that way. Do you understand? Now that everything had been taught to you already, there is no need for you to find another guru. I am the Buddha, and I have taught you everything, and so you don't need to find another guru. Therefore, his way of answering was not like what most of you have said, you only need the precepts to practice, but there is no need for a guru. If you do not believe, you can try to memorize all the precepts and see if you can stay within the Dharma realm. The Diamond Sutra is not a scripture of the precepts. When the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was about to leave this world, why was it that he did not ask us to read the Diamond Sutra? He had said it before. Was it necessary to ask him to repeat everything that he had said before from the very beginning? Of course not. Because he was about to leave soon, he had to keep his energy to do other things. Did you know that when he walked to the place whereabout he was to enter into Mahaparinirvana, he was already very ill? He was bandaged all over his body, holding a walking stick, and was struggling hard, step by step to head towards the grove of Shaurya Robusta toilfully. Did you still want to ask him so many questions? He was about to leave soon, and was very ill and out of breath. How could he still possibly answer so many questions from you? Hence, when Venerable Ananda asked the Lord Buddha about something, he would just answer with that particular thing which Ananda should need to hear. What was it that Ananda needed to hear? Take the precepts as your teacher. So, it is important to take the precepts as your teacher. Even Venerable Ananda would need it, and of course, all of you would also need it. Do you still need to question this? However, Venerable Ananda did not need to find another guru. So will this be the same for all of you? Of course not. Remember, whenever you listen to something, try to listen to the whole scenario of it. Many people use this as excuses to refute that Tantric Buddhism should not have gurus. Only ignorant people will make a lot of excuses to refute. The second question was, what kind of thoughts should we abide by? I will explain this to you later. Thirdly, how should we tame vicious bhikshus? Some people are very stubborn. They will neither obey nor repent, no matter how they were taught. What could be done about this? Brahmadanda. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni said, Brahmadanda, that is, social excommunication, which means that they were prohibited from all kinds of conversations and communications with the Sangha community, including all of the other disciples. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni only answered, Brahmadanda. You have to know that the precepts, especially the tantric precepts, they were written very clearly in the precepts. The same goes for those exoteric precepts. It has been written as follows: suppose you have accepted a disciple and have asked him, her to repent, yet she refuses to do so. When more than 3 years have elapsed, if she still refuses to repent, you could no longer keep him, her as your disciple. You could not teach him anything anymore. If you continue to accept him, her as a disciple, both of you will fall to the hellhelm together. This precept has been written so clearly. As gurus, we are bound by many precepts. So, please do not think that when you refuse to repent after violating the precepts, you can just say, you have compassion, don't you? Aren't you teaching the Compassion and Bodhicitta series now? Why must you put me into Brahmadanda, just because I do not repent after violating few precepts? And now you will not teach me anything. You have no compassion at all. Please do not use such excuses to question me. I am sorry to say, I can have a lot of precepts yet to tell you about. If you do not repent, but you have to get ready to find another guru. I will definitely implement this precept. If others do not execute their duties as gurus, that is because they do not care, or maybe they do not understand these precepts. But we do understand, and so we will definitely implement them. Not only do we understand, but we also like to implement them. Therefore, if you are willing to be our disciples, you must know that we will definitely implement it. You must repent if you are wrong. Do not keep on refuting that you are not wrong. I just want to know if you have any intrinsic awareness to see where you have gone wrong. I don't want to know where he has gone wrong, or where she has gone wrong, and where the guru has gone wrong. I don't want to hear all of these stuffs. I just want to hear you say of what you personally have done wrong, and whether you have any intrinsic awareness or not. I just want to hear of these. I don't want to hear from you of telling me what ABCD have done wrong. You should have self-reflection inwardly, and not looking outwardly for enemies. Okay, then, fourthly, how can we prove to other people to make them believe in the posthumous teachings of the world-honored one? I have talked about this in my previous lectures. The Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had taught the Venerable Ananda, you have to state things very clearly. For example, once, meaning, at that time, where did you listen to the Buddha's teachings? How many people were there listening? If you can quote and describe all these informative details while reciting any passage of the sutras, then everyone will come to believe in it. What do I really want to focus on? If you want to know the detailed explanations, you can refer to the articles on the tours of the Holy Lands from issues 21 and 22 of the Lake of Lotus. All these have already been explained in those articles. Actually, what I actually want to talk about most is what kind of thoughts should we abide by. Why do I want to talk about this sentence the most? Because someone wrote an email to challenge me about this sentence. How did he challenge me? I do not want to talk about it here as to how he challenged me. I just want to explain, what kind of thoughts should we abide by? That means, what kind of thoughts and thinking methods should your daily thinking be based upon to link and abide in your mind? What the Venerable Ananda wanted to ask was the same question as the one being asked by the elder Subhuti to the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni: where should our minds abide by? It is the same as the sentence of how should their minds be abiding by? How should their thoughts be subdued? At that time, in reply to Ananda's question of what kind of thoughts should we abide by, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni taught him, you should abide by the Satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness. It was the 4 foundations of mindfulness that this person wanted to challenge me. His question was the same as the one being asked by the elder Subhuti, that is, how should their minds be abiding by? How should their thoughts be subdued? It was just his way of expression that was different. So, what are the 4 foundations of mindfulness? They are the mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, and mindfulness of phenomena. These 4 methods refer to such a Dharma practice of how your mind can abide by those thinking and thoughts. They involve both the individual characteristics, or svalaksana, in Sanskrit, and common characteristics, or samanyalaksana, in Sanskrit, of the mundane, or worldly affairs. So actually, what are the individual characteristics, and common characteristics? Oh, there are so many terminologies. You may be very much confused. Anyway, I will explain them to you right now. That is to say, your own form and appearance, the common forms and appearances, and the forms and appearances of the surrounding things and the environment, all used as a kind of method to assist you in your Dharma practice. So, what is it? That is contemplation of the body as impure. You have to visualize that your body is filthy. Then, what are the individual characteristics and common characteristics of this? That is to visualize that your body is filthy, and that other people's bodies are also filthy. Suppose there is an outbreak of cholera now. It is because the people are filthy, thus making the surrounding environment to become dirty. In this dirty environment, people infect each other, so everyone gets cholera. We call this as the common characteristic. This is to visualize with the common forms and appearances of the surroundings, together with the things and environments that are happening in the surroundings. Our bodies are filthy, thus causing cholera. So, will you still be attached to whether your body is beautiful or not? Will you keep looking in the mirror and wondering what your waist size should be in order to look attractive? Will you still do this? Not anymore, right? This is the Holy Dharma as explained by the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. Would anyone question that he had contradicted himself? Someone had questioned me as follows: you once have said that one should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions. But now, you taught other people the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and asked them to visualize their bodies and their surroundings as filthy, to be followed by the contemplation of feelings as suffering. That is, all feelings are painful with sufferings. Even the database of feelings, that is, the aggregate of sensations, has to be dug up by you. Furthermore, one has to visualize how suffering oneself is, how suffering others are, and how suffering is, on the whole, in this ocean of sufferings. Didn't you say before that all visualizations are the same as in making connections with the magnetic fields? If I were to accidentally connect with the magnetic field of suffering, I would then have to be reborn in the magnetic field of suffering in the future, and end up in the hell realm. That is a big issue. Furthermore, someone had challenged me like this and asked a similar question. Let me give you an example. But before giving the example, let me first explain the contemplation of the mind as impermanent. You have to visualize that the mind is always impermanent, unstable, and fluctuating all the time. So, you have to visualize your own mind and know that it is impermanent. the contemplation of the Dharma as being selflessness, that is, one must not abide in the notion of a self for all sorts of methods and phenomena. But it does not include the teachings that one must also not abide in the notions of others, of sentient beings, or of longevity, all of which are not taught yet, simply because this teaching belongs to the primary school level. These 4 foundations of mindfulness are actually teaching materials for primary schools. To put it simply, these are all the Dharma practices of abiding in notions. Thus, there are 2 challenges here. The first one is to challenge the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. He said the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni taught people the Diamond Sutra, and asked them not to abide in notions. On the other hand, he taught those Hinayana practitioners, that is, primary school students, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and told him to abide in notions, in terms of everything. So, actually, which is the correct one? The second one is to challenge me, not the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. This is how he challenged me. You have taught the Diamond Sutra, and you said one should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions. But, when the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was about to leave this world, and was at the most critical moment when someone asked him, where should we abide, that is, where should our minds be abided? The Lord Buddha still answered with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. It was not like what you have said, should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions. Then he said again, okay, take these 4 foundations of mindfulness as equivalent to, should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions. I will not challenge the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni anymore. Then he said to me, let me tell you that the 4 foundations of mindfulness mean, should not abide anywhere, and do not abide in notions. How come you don't even know of this? If you do not teach the 4 foundations of mindfulness to your disciples can never attain Buddhahood. Why don't you teach your disciples the 4 foundations of mindfulness? He scolded me like this. I think this person is really funny in saying such a thing. Let me give you another example. Say a teacher answered the students' questions. Would the teacher be challenged if he gave different answers to different students? For example, a primary school student asked, I want to learn mathematics. What should I learn? The teacher replied to the primary school student, you should learn addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Another secondary school student asked the teacher, I want to learn mathematics too. What should I learn? The teacher replied to the secondary school student, you should learn algebra. Then, another university student asked, I want to learn mathematics. What should I learn? The teacher replied to the university student, you should learn calculus. Would you scold this teacher by saying, what are you doing? You asked one student to learn addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Then you asked another student to learn algebra, and then you asked another student to learn calculus. Aren't you contradicting yourself? In fact, I can tell you that Venerable Ananda had not yet attained the holy fruit of arhatship at that time. He had not yet graduated from primary school. Do you know that Hinayana is equivalent to the primary school level? Because Hinayana will neither talk about the Dharma realm, nor about attaining Buddhahood. It only talks about going to the 5 highest levels among the heavens of the form realm, in order to become liberated from the cycle of karmic existence samsara. This is why the Dharma practices of Hinayana only talk about non-abiding in the notion of a self, instead of non-abiding in the 4 notions. That is why it only talks about the thoughts and thinking, of abiding in notions. Why is it necessary for them to practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness? It is because the 4 foundations of mindfulness are a compulsory subject for primary school students. It is to teach them to have a mind of renunciation, so that they do not just think about the beauty of one's body, or the enjoyments of life all the time. All these are the things that will make you suffer, so you should abandon them. Your body will one day decay in the future, so you should not dwell upon it. Your mind is always impermanent. Many Dharma methods that are not suitable for you to practice, please discard them. All those real and genuine Dharma methods will require you to be non-abiding in the notion of a self, in order to become successful in your Dharma practice. This is what the 4 foundations of mindfulness is all about. All these things are of primary school level. At that time, it was Venerable Ananda who asked the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni those questions. If it is a question asked by a primary school student, of course it is natural that we'll have to give an answer that fits primary school level. If it is a question asked by a secondary school student, then we should have to give an answer that is suitable for secondary school level. You have no reason to use what the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni said before his Mahaparinirvana to refute his prior teachings to university students by saying that he was contradicting himself. And then use the same argument to refute me in questioning why I did not teach other people the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The Diamond Sutra belongs to the university level. The teachings of Mahayana is for the university level. The 4 foundations of mindfulness belong to the Dharma practice of abiding in notions. Whereas should not abide anywhere and do not abide in notions belong to the Dharma practice of non-abiding in notions. This challenger was really teaching his grandmother to suck eggs. He said that the 4 foundations of mindfulness are the same as should not abide anywhere and do not abide in notions. How ridiculous this is. He said that the Dharma practice of abiding in notions is equivalent to the Dharma practice of non-abiding in notions. This showed that this person was teaching his grandmother to suck eggs. He did not understand anything, yet he showed off his knowledge and scolded me. He said, "Why didn't you teach your disciples the 4 foundations of mindfulness? You are preventing your disciples from attaining Buddhahood in the future." He condemned me like this. Wow. What a great accusation this is. In fact, did I teach the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Of course I did. Do you know that the purpose of the 4 foundations of mindfulness is to make sentient beings to arouse the mind of renunciation? In fact, there is a video entitled 4 Ordinary and Extraordinary Foundations on our YouTube channel, which teaches that some visualizations are not to be practiced casually. If you visualize feelings as great sufferings, you will easily make connections with the magnetic fields of suffering, and then you will be reborn in a place full of sufferings in the future. I have taught all the taboos of visualization. I have already taught them all. You can watch that video on our YouTube channel, which already taught the taboos of visualization. If what you are learning is still at the primary school level, then you will need to upgrade yourself. I have already taught that once you have successfully aroused your mind of renunciation, you should not continue with the contemplation of feelings as suffering. If you still continue to visualize in such a way, you will really become connected to the magnetic fields of suffering. You will be in great trouble, for you may end up in the hell realm. So, you have to remember this. I am now explaining to this person because he had challenged me. So I have to explain and make him understand. I want to tell him why I do not teach the 4 foundations of mindfulness but only teach the 4 ordinary and extraordinary foundations. In addition, all the taboos of visualization have to be explained as well. This is because people nowadays do not know how to teach all these. People who know how to teach these only existed within the first 500 years after the Lord Buddha's Mahaparinirvana. After that, many of the essences of the holy Buddhist teachings were gone. So, if I want to keep these essences by now, and thus I should no longer just involve the teachings on those aspects of the primary school level, I must have to explain clearly and to clarify on the important point of different levels of teachings. And why do I have to teach you the Diamond Sutra, and not those sutras of the Hinayana? Simply because the effectiveness and efficiency of the Diamond Sutra are much greater and faster. With just one thought, you can already arouse immeasurable merits, and all the Buddhas will know your existence and will save you successfully. I will certainly not teach you a method that is so slow and requires you to recite the holy name of a Buddha, without any disturbance of thoughts for 1 to 7 days, before you can connect with the Buddha. Even if so, you still cannot know whether you can be rescued successfully, or whether the Buddha will come to your rescue or not. I will definitely not teach you such a slow method. Instead, I will teach you those methods that are much faster. I will teach you some affirmative methods that will work for sure. Right. So, you have to watch our YouTube videos. Some people asked, there are so many videos on your YouTube channel. I don't know how they are classified. Which ones belong to the beginner or intermediate levels? Are there any other advanced level videos? In fact, we have made an order list for watching, which is available on our website. You can check it out on our Chinese website. Okay, the Heart Sutra talks about the state of the Dharma realm. The Diamond Sutra talks about how we can simulate the state of the Dharma realm in our daily life, so as to have a pre-training in advance of how to enter into the Dharma realm in the future. We are now in the 3 realms. Since the Dharma realm is in the state of oneness, while the 3 realms are in the dualistic or multiplistic states, so how do we strike a balance between these two? How can the two merge together? How do we balance the training on the union of the Dharma realm and the 3 realms? These will be explained in our future countless episodes of the Visualization Practices of Compassion and Bodhicitta series. And our Great Perfection also talks about the visualization practices of both bodhicitta and the perfect enlightenment. The Treasury of Dharmadhatu is in a sense of the oral pith instructions for practicing the Great Perfection of our Nyingma school red sect. It was written by Kungkyun Longchen Rajam, one of the greatest lineage masters of our Nyingma school red sect who specialized in the Great Perfection practice. It is a collection of the oral pith instructions from the 17 Dzogchen Tantras, which are the 17 kinds of uncommon, in which uncommon refers to their uniqueness of the Nyingma per actual practice methods. But due to time constraints, I will not explain them today. I will leave it for next time. It can help us to practice bodhicitta. Let us review some of the oral pith instructions as follows, in the Avatamsaka Sutra. Chapter on the preaching of teachings at the cloud assembly of all the countless bodhisattva in the Sayama celestial palace. Section 16. It is clearly stated that the mind, Buddha and sentient beings, they are 3, yet without any differences. They will have to be merged into one. First, you must have to achieve the state of fusion into one. Otherwise, you cannot stay within the Dharma realm of the state of oneness. You will continue to stay in the 3 realms of the dualistic or multiplistic states, simply because you still have a dualistic concept of subject and object. Second, the visualization of emptiness itself is also a kind of notion, forms, or appearance. We must not cling onto any notions, forms, or appearances, including the notion, form, and appearance of emptiness itself. We should only visualize the characteristics of emptiness. Third, we should use our intrinsic awareness and our nature of the mind as the core for our Dharma practice. Fourth, do not forget to initiate the programming in entering into the Dharma realm. After entering, do not cling onto it anymore, of course. These are all the important oral pith instructions. Many people have said to me, Guru, the Diamond Sutra that you have taught is so profound. Can you teach something more simple such as Introduction to Buddhism? I may not have the time to do it, but I can arrange a Buddhism introductory gathering to meet some of your requests. It will be held on October the 6th, 2018, Saturday night from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Anyone is welcome. It is free, and there is no prerequisite for participation. What will we do in this first gathering? We will introduce all the Buddha statues and thankas of our Dajjom Buddhist Association International. Do you know the names and merits of all the Buddhas that are depicted in each of the thankas? Many people do not know about this. This time, we will give you a guided tour of the Dajjom Buddhist Association International. We will show you around and explain to you the details. It will be held at our association's address. Please remember to come over and join us. At that time, our Dharma propagation team will assist you. You can ask any questions. I have answered all the questions from those who have challenged me. So, regardless of whether the questions you ask are to challenge me or not, I will answer all of them. You can ask any questions, but they may not be answered immediately. Please allow our Dharma propagation team to help you first. If they cannot answer them, they will write down the questions and then ask me later. I will then respond in the future. I will answer them in my future lectures. Okay, when is our next lecture? It will be given during the Smoke Offerings Dharma event on the fourth day of the 4 major Sacred Buddha's Days, which will fall on the 28th of October, 2018. The 12th episode of the Visualization Practice of Compassion and Bodhicitta series will be explained by then. We will have a live broadcast. Actually, we have been conducting live broadcasts for a long time, but I did not promote them before. So, many people are not aware of our live broadcasts. You can apply to participate in the live broadcast. There is an online application form for it on our website. I will continue to teach 1. The visualization practice method in daily life. 2. The Great Perfection Oral Pith instructions for initiating the programming of entering into the Dharma realm. 3. The Oral Pith instructions of the visualization practice of bodhicitta from the treasury of Dharma Dhatu. 4. A comparison on the Oral Pith instructions of the visualization practices by the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and the Great Perfection. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you to participate in today's Smoke Offerings Dharma event to commemorate the birth of the Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha. Let me briefly introduce the auspicious merits of Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha. This Bodhisattva is called Ksitagarbha in Sanskrit and Sinying Per in Tibetan. Why is he called Ksitagarbha, earth treasure? There is a special meaning for it. It is because he is as peaceful, patient and unmoving as the earth, and his quiet filtering with deep concentration and visualization is a hidden treasure. Hence, he is called Ksitagarbha, which means the earth treasure. That is to say, although he is sitting in hell, his mind is totally unmoved just like the earth. And he is deeply concentrated in visualization practice, like a secret treasure. It is thus conceivable where his sublimity and auspiciousness lies. First of all, I would like to introduce this sutra, named as the Sutra of the Fundamental Vows of the Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha. It is a sutra told by the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni while preaching the holy Dharma to his mother in the heaven of Trayastrimsa Pali, Tavatimsa. The first chapter of Sutra of the Fundamental Vows of the Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha recorded that the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni once told Bodhisattva Manjushri, Suppose the 3,000 large thousand-fold worlds were broken up into fine motes of dust. That is to say, all the 3,000 large thousand-fold worlds are shattered and turned into fine motes of dust, and each mote of dust is counted as one kalpa. The time since Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha attained the holy fruit of 10th ground Bodhisattva has been longer than the kalpas of the aforementioned amount of dust in the 3,000 large thousandfold worlds. That is to say, it has been countless kalpas since he realized the holy fruit of the 10th ground Bodhisattva. In fact, it is impossible to calculate. If compared with the amount of fine dust produced by shattering all the 3,000 large thousandfold worlds, the number of kalpas is even greater. Not to mention the countless kalpas that Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha had gone through since practicing as a Sravaka, or attaining the holy fruit of Pratyeka Buddha. In other words, what the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni told Bodhisattva Manjushri were his high praises for Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha's sublime merits. But why did he still not want to attain Buddhahood after such a long time? It is because of the vows that he had made long time ago. With the holy fruit of the 10th ground Bodhisattva, he is only 1.5 levels different from that of the Buddha's holy fruit. Why is it 1.5 level? We know that there are 10 levels from the 1st ground to the 10th ground. And after the 10th ground, there is still the 10.5 ground known as the equally enlightened Bodhisattva. Like the Bodhisattva Maitreya in the heaven of Tusita, now, who has reached this 10.5 ground, but still has not yet formally attained the Buddha's holy fruit yet. Then, what is the Buddha's holy fruit? It is the wonderful enlightenment. Wonderful enlightenment is the Buddha's holy fruit. Bodhisattva Maitreya has to come back to the Saha world one more time to manifest that he still needs to practice the holy Dharma before his attaining Buddhahood. This is what taking up of a Buddha's place in his next life means. He has to come back one more time before he can attain Buddhahood. Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha is only 1.5 levels away from the holy fruit of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. This is the situation. But, because he is compassionate to all sentient beings, he is willing to endure hardship and toil to complete his bodhisattva path. He made grand vows and aspirations. All of you are quite clear about his vows and aspirations, which are: if I do not go into the hell realm, who would be willing to go into the hell realm, and the next, as long as the hell realms are not empty, I shall not attain Buddhahood. These are his grand aspirations. Therefore, it is why he has yet to attain Buddhahood despite already being a 10th ground Bodhisattva and practicing holy Dharma for immeasurable and countless kalpas. In fact, if he wanted to attain Buddhahood, he would have attained Buddhahood long time ago. It is only because he made such great vows and aspirations, as long as the hell realms are not empty, I shall not attain Buddhahood, and so he continues to remain over here. You can imagine how grand his aspirations are. Ever since far-away kalpas, he repeated his grand aspirations, and that is why we honored him as the Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha of great aspirations. It is also said in the Sutra of the Fundamental Vows of the Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha. If there are virtuous men or virtuous women who respectfully look upon and pay homage to the image of the Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha and praise and chant the name of Bodhisattva Ksitagarbha, they will get 7 kinds of benefits. These 7 benefits are: 1. Swiftly enter into the Holy Land. 2. Elimination of evil karmas. 3. All Buddhas will come to protect you. 4. Non-retrogression of your body. 5. Strengthening of fundamental power. 6. Recollections and predictions of past, present, and future. 7. Ultimate attainment of Buddhahood. That is, you can gradually advance on your path of Dharma practice smoothly. In the end, you can attain the Buddhist fruition. Therefore, we have honored Ksitagava as the Bodhisattva of great aspiration, Avalokiteshvara as the Bodhisattva of great compassion, Manjushri as the Bodhisattva of great wisdom, and Samantabhadra as the Bodhisattva of great action. They are all here to save all sentient beings. They are the four great bodhisattvas in Chinese Buddhism. They are deeply respected by people all over the world. The fundamental Dharma center of Bodhisattva Ksitagava is in Mount Yuhua in Anhui Province, China. Avalokiteshvara center is in Mount Putuo, Zhejiang Province. Bodhisattva Manjushri's center is in Wutai Mountain in Shanxi Province, and Bodhisattva Samantabhadra center is in Mount Hemei in Sichuan Province. These four mountains are collectively referred to as the four famous mountains of Buddhism in China. This is their history and the causes and conditions. There is still another story. Have you heard of a Ksitagava King Bodhisattva? He is not the same person as the Bodhisattva Ksitagava. During the Kayuan of the Tang dynasty, there was a country named Silla in ancient times, which is Korea by now. At that time, there was a son of the royal family, whose name was Kim Byogak. When he was very young, he had already made a wish to renunciate and to be ordinated as a monk. He came to Mount Yuhua in China for his ascetic practices and lived in Nantai. He lived in the wild and worked very hard on his Dharma practices. He passed away at the age of 99. While he was still alive, there were many efficacious happenings appeared, the so-called miracles. And so those people at that time believed that he must be the manifestation of Bodhisattva Ksitagava. Since then, after his death, he has been honored as Ksitagava King Bodhisattva, and Mount Yuhua is recognized as the Dharma center of Bodhisattva Ksitagava. The folklore believes that every July 30th in the lunar calendar is the birthday of Bodhisattva Ksitagava. And so today is the commemoration day of his birthday. You can have a look at his Dharma image. His body is golden yellow, with one head and two arms. He is wearing a heavenly crown on his head and kasaya on his body. He is holding a bright pearl in his left hand and a tin staff in his right hand. Some images show his standing posture on the lotus, some sitting on the lotus. There are two kinds of his Dharma images. This is a brief introduction to the sublime and auspicious merits of Bodhisattva Ksitagava.